Welcome to the first paradox, the silence paradox. Let's start with a simple but mind-bending question. How can saying nothing say everything? This is a paradox that lives in silence. It's a strange trick that feels too empty to work, yet it can completely flip a conversation upside down. Think about it. You ask someone a difficult question. Why did you lie about that? Or, what are you not telling me? And then you stop. You don't add any words. You don't soften the blow. You don't try to fill the space. You just go silent. No words, no rescue, nothing. That's the power pause. And then something strange happens. That silence starts to speak loudly, not to you, but to them. Their mind begins to spin. Why isn't he saying anything? What is she thinking right now? Do I need to explain more? The human brain hates uncertainty, so it starts to panic. The silence stretches. It becomes awkward, uncomfortable, almost unbearable. And suddenly, they talk. They explain. They confess. They reveal more than they planned to. You didn't move. You didn't raise your voice. You just paused. That's the paradox. You controlled everything by doing nothing. It doesn't make sense because we're taught to be assertive, to push our point, to fill every silence with logic, argument, or emotion. But this is the opposite. It's restraint. And restraint doesn't feel powerful until you use it. Here's why this paradox works so deeply. Silence doesn't mean nothing. It means waiting. And waiting makes people wonder. People fill in blanks. They add meaning. They assume judgment, disapproval, curiosity, or threat. All you did was pause, but in their mind, you created a storm. Here's the real twist. The less you say, the more they hear. That's the inversion. We believe that to be heard, we must speak more. But in truth, the brain hates ambiguity. It craves resolution. So when you give someone a sharp question and follow it with silence, their mind won't rest until that silence is resolved. That's when the truth slips out. It's like holding up a mirror, not a physical one, but a mental one. The pause reflects their thoughts right back at them. And in that reflection, the truth becomes louder. They start answering questions you didn't even ask. Their mind says, I need to break this silence. I need to explain myself. I need to protect myself. And that's when they open the door.
The power pause isn't a trick. It's a pressure point. It's the space after the strike that matters. The question stings, and the pause amplifies it. Like a drum beat, you don't just hear the hit, you hear the echo. Now, let's go deeper. Why does silence hold so much power? Because in social settings, silence is rare. We're addicted to noise. We fill every gap with something, words, jokes, explanations, or defenses. So when someone dares to go quiet, the rules change. It signals control, confidence, calm. And nothing is more intimidating than someone who stays completely calm in a moment of tension. It's like playing poker, the person who never blinks, never fidgets, and just stares silently after a bold move. That's the person everyone fears, because you don't know what they're thinking. That's what the power pause does. It creates mystery, and mystery always leads to movement. You don't have to force anything. They'll do it to themselves. Here's the wild part. People often think that talking gives them control, but the real control lies in what you withhold. Silence becomes leverage. The pause becomes a test. Will they stay calm? Will they rush to defend themselves? Will they reveal something they didn't mean to say? You discover the truth not by pressing harder, but by pulling back. It's like fishing. You don't yank the line immediately. You wait. You feel. You let the tension build. The pause is that tension, and tension always seeks release. That release is their words. Still, don't mistake silence for passivity. It's not weak, it's active, intentional, surgical. You don't go quiet because you have nothing to say. You go quiet because they have something to say, and you're giving them space to reveal it. That's why the power pause is so paradoxical. It's loud in its quietness, aggressive in its stillness, dominant in its subtlety. The world teaches us to respond fast, speak often, and take control by force. But the power pause flips that entirely. You take control by holding back. You weaponize stillness. The silence becomes a force they can't ignore. It's also disarming. When someone expects a fight and instead gets stillness, their guard drops, their rhythm breaks, and in that break, truth slips out. People are less filtered when they're trying to fix a moment that feels wrong, and an awkward silence feels very wrong. So they scramble, and in that scramble, they expose. Now, imagine using this in your daily life. In a negotiation, pause after they give you a number. Just look at them. Wait. Don't flinch. In a relationship, pause after you ask, "Is that really how you feel?" In an argument, pause after you say, "That's not what I heard." You're not trying to win with volume. You're letting them fill in the gaps, and they will. Because silence hurts, it itches, it stretches, and in that stretched moment, the mask slips. You're not being manipulative. You're being strategic. You're creating space for the truth to surface. You're letting discomfort do the work. And that's the heart of the paradox. In a world that runs from awkward silence, you walk straight into it and let them run from it instead. So, next time you want the truth, don't chase it. Just create the gap. Ask your question, make your bold statement, and then say nothing.
Welcome to the next paradox, Benjamin Franklin effect. The idea that getting someone to help you makes them like you more. It sounds strange at first. We usually assume that if we want people to like us, we should help them. We should give, support, and offer. But this flips that idea completely. It says, don't give, ask. Don't serve, receive. Because when someone does something small for you, something changes in their mind. They start liking you more. Not because of what you gave them, but because of what they gave you. That's called the Benjamin Franklin effect, and it's a complete reversal of logic. Franklin himself noticed it first. He had a rival in politics, a man who didn't like him. Instead of trying to win him over with kindness or favors, Franklin did something unexpected. He asked the man if he could borrow a rare book. Just a small request. The man agreed. Franklin thanked him and returned it later. But after that moment, their relationship changed. The man warmed up to him, even became a friend. Not because Franklin gave something, but because he asked for something. Something interesting happens here. The paradox lives in a small, simple truth. When we do a favor for someone, it makes us like them more. Our brain doesn't like contradictions. So when we help someone even though we didn't have to, our mind starts asking, "Why did I do that?" Then it answers itself, "I must like this person. Otherwise, why would I help them?" The help justifies the feeling. Even if the feeling wasn't there before, it grows afterward. We don't help people because we like them. We like people because we help them. That's the reversal. And the mind does this quietly. You ask for a small favor, a pencil, a little advice, a simple opinion. They say yes, and that yes begins to touch something deeper. They start telling themselves a story. I helped them, so I must value them. They must be worth my time. And just like that, a bond is created, not from giving, but from receiving. It's not manipulation, it's just human nature. The mind wants to stay consistent. Once we act kindly, we adjust our beliefs to match our behavior. If I helped you, then I must feel something positive toward you. Otherwise, my action wouldn't make sense. That's what makes this paradox so powerful. It's not based on charm, wealth, or clever words. It's built on the small, simple act of asking.
And when you ask, you create space for the other person to step into that story. But it only works if the favor is small. If you ask for too much, it feels like a transaction. The mind switches back to logic. I did this because I had to. But a small favor flies under the radar. It slips past defenses. It feels unimportant until it isn't. Because now they've invested something, a moment, a choice, a bit of themselves. Once someone invests in you, they subconsciously want a return, but not from you, but from within themselves. That return is emotional. It's tied to identity. I'm someone who helps good people. So if I helped you, you must be a good person. See the twist? You're not proving your worth to them. They're deciding your worth because they helped you. That's why the Benjamin Franklin effect is so paradoxical. You gain more by taking a little than by giving a lot. And that's hard for people to accept. We want to impress, to be generous, to earn affection. But this effect tells us to pause. Stop trying to give. Try asking. Just enough to let someone feel like they've done something meaningful for you. The more they do, the more they justify liking you.
It becomes a cycle, a self-reinforcing loop. They help, they like. They help again, they like more. And none of it feels forced, because their own actions convince them. This flips the usual social playbook upside down. Most people try to build connection by giving, serving, or sacrificing to win affection. But that can feel unbalanced. It can even make the other person feel guilty or resistant, because being helped often creates a sense of debt. But when they help you, the feeling reverses. Now they feel in control. They made a choice. They see you as someone worth choosing. And that feeling grows, not because of what you did, but because of what you allowed them to do. That's why great leaders and natural connectors use this without realizing it. They ask for opinions, for insights, for small bits of help. And in doing that, they draw people in, not through power, but through participation. It even builds trust in reverse. Normally, we think trust is earned by proving ourselves. But when you trust someone enough to ask them for help, they start to feel trusted. And when they feel trusted, they begin to trust you back. Another reversal. The Benjamin Franklin effect is full of these opposites. Give to receive? No. Receive to build. Help to be liked? No. Be helped and the liking follows. Connection doesn't begin with your gift. It begins with their contribution. And their contribution changes how they see you. So, how do you use this? Gently, naturally. Ask for something small that costs little but matters just enough. Can I get your take on this? Do you have a moment to explain this part? Mind helping me choose between these two options? These don't sound like tricks. They sound like what they are. Simple invitations. And when people accept those invitations, they're also accepting you. Here's where the paradox deepens. You might think asking for help makes you seem weak, but it actually makes you more human, more open, more relatable. It invites connection through vulnerability, not the dramatic kind, but the everyday kind, the kind people respond to without even noticing. And once they respond, their feelings follow. So, next time you want someone to like you, try this. Don't flatter, don't overgive, don't perform. Just ask. Just enough. Then step back. Let their mind do the rest. Let them write this story about why they helped you. And in writing that story, they'll write you into their good graces. You'll have done almost nothing, and yet you'll gain everything.
Welcome to the next paradox, the mirroring paradox. This one is about how copying someone can make them trust you more. It sounds strange. We're told to be original, to stand out, to be ourselves. But this flips the idea upside down. It says, if you want someone to feel close to you, If you want connection without effort, don't stand out, blend in. Don't lead, mirror. The paradox is simple. The more you act like them, the more they feel you are like them. Not because you said the right words, not because you share deep ideas, but because, without them noticing, you moved like them. You shifted when they shifted. You leaned when they leaned. You touched your face a second after they did. You nodded slowly when they paused. And all of it happened quietly, beneath awareness. The power of mirroring lies in its invisibility. If they notice it, it breaks. If they don't, it bonds. Because the brain is always searching for patterns, for safety, for familiarity. And nothing feels safer than seeing yourself reflected in another person. You don't even need to know someone to make them feel connected. You just move like they do, sit how they sit, gesture with similar energy, and something inside them whispers, "This person understands me," even if you've barely said a word. It's not about flattery, it's about rhythm. Every person has their own social rhythm, how fast they speak, how big their movements are, how they use their hands, how they breathe. Mirroring is matching that rhythm like a silent dance. When you match someone's rhythm, their brain sees you as in sync. And when people feel in sync, they feel safe. Here's the twist. We think connection comes from words, but often the connection happens before words even begin. It happens in the first few seconds, when your posture lines up with theirs, when your smile appears at the same moment, when your body speaks the same language, and all of it happens silently. This is why mirroring works, because people don't really listen to what you say until they feel you're like them. And the fastest way to feel alike is to look alike, just for a moment, just enough for the brain to say, "Yes, you're part of my tribe." Now here's the full paradox. You gain influence not by leading first, but by following quietly. You don't push your own style, you adopt theirs. And when you do that, they open up to you. Their guard drops, their mind relaxes, their trust grows, because deep down, people trust what feels familiar. And what's more familiar than their own movements? Mirroring feels like surrender. You're not showing off, you're not controlling, you're simply matching. But that surrender becomes your power, because once they feel safe, then you can lead. Then you can guide the flow, but only after you've matched their rhythm. It's like music. Two instruments can't harmonize unless they're tuned to the same key. Mirroring is that tuning. It says, "I see you. I move with you. I'm not a threat." And that message unlocks the door to trust.
This trust happens even if they don't consciously notice what you're doing. That's the beauty of it. The moment they feel seen, not by your eyes, but by your body, they begin to soften. They lean in more. They talk more. They open up. You didn't impress them. You didn't outsmart them. You simply mirrored them, and that was enough. But don't mistake this for imitation. Imitation is obvious, awkward, and fake. Mirroring is subtle. A few seconds delay, a half beat behind. Just enough to say, "I'm here with you," without copying like a puppet. That delay is important. Too fast and it looks strange. Too exact and it feels staged. But a small reflection, a posture shift, a slight tilt, a similar tone, these create that invisible bridge, and that bridge holds the entire conversation. This paradox teaches something deeper. Humans crave connection, not perfection. We don't trust the person who looks flawless. We trust the one who reflects us. And that reflection doesn't need to be verbal. It can be physical, emotional, or energetic. Mirroring taps into this without force. It's not a trick, it's alignment. You're not trying to win, you're trying to resonate. And once resonance is there, the real conversation begins. This is why skilled communicators mirror naturally. They don't fake it, they feel it. They tune into the other person's state, and their body adjusts without thinking. Because real mirroring isn't mechanical, it's emotional. You feel someone's energy, and your body follows. But even if you start intentionally, that's okay. With practice, mirroring becomes instinct. You start to feel people more than analyze them. And that feeling shapes your movements, your pace, your tone, all without saying, "I'm like you." Your body says it for you. The paradox grows deeper. The more you disappear into someone's rhythm, the more they see you. You become visible by being invisible. You become trusted by not trying too hard, because effort creates distance. Subtlety creates closeness. It's soft power, and soft power always lasts longer. So try it. Next time you meet someone new, don't force charm. Just listen. Watch. Sit like they sit. Mirror their pace. Nod when they nod. Gesture in rhythm. Speak with their energy. Not to copy, but to reflect. And then watch the wall fall. Watch the warmth rise. Watch the words flow. All because you made them feel seen without telling them a single thing. That's the paradox of mirroring. You lead by following. You connect by reflecting. You become memorable not by being loud, but by being in tune. And once you're in tune, everything else becomes easy.
Welcome to the next paradox, the paradox of naming emotion. This one is about how naming a feeling can shrink it. It sounds backwards. When someone's upset, you'd think talking about their emotions would make it worse. You'd think naming anger would feed it, calling out sadness would deepen it, pointing out distress would strengthen it. But no, it does the opposite. When you put words to an emotion, it starts to lose its grip. The storm quiets, the temperature drops, and the person begins to breathe again. This is called affect labeling. And the paradox is this: when someone's drowning in emotion, you don't solve it by avoiding the feeling. You solve it by naming it. You say, "You seem frustrated. You sound overwhelmed. You look like this is really bothering you." And in that tiny sentence, something powerful happens. They feel seen, not judged, not fixed, just noticed. And being noticed in the middle of chaos, that's the lifeline. The mind is loud when it's emotional. Feelings come in waves, unorganized, chaotic, raw. But when you take all that chaos and give it a name, you put structure around it. You build a small box around a big mess. And the moment that box appears, the mess feels less scary. That's the paradox. When you name the monster, it stops being a monster. We're taught to comfort people with solutions, with logic, with words like, "calm down," "don't worry," or "look on the bright side." But those don't actually calm anyone. In fact, they often make it worse, because the person doesn't feel understood. They feel dismissed. They're told to stop feeling what they're clearly feeling. But when you label their emotion, even softly, it says the opposite. I see what's happening inside you. I'm not running from it. I'm right here with it. And that simple act reduces the intensity of what they're feeling. It's not magic. It's how the brain works. When emotion floods the brain, especially fear, anger, or sadness, it hijacks our ability to think clearly. But when someone gives us language, when they name what we're feeling, it activates a different part of the brain, the thinking part, the part that organizes, reasons, and reflects. And that small switch changes everything. You don't need to solve their problem, you just need to help them see it more clearly. Naming brings clarity, and clarity brings calm. You can say, "Sounds like this really hurt you," or "You seem disappointed," or even, "I can tell this isn't sitting right with you." That's it. No lectures, no advice, just a label. And that label becomes a handle. Now they're not drowning, they're holding on to something. And with that grip, they start to breathe, they start to speak, they start to let go. It's strange how little effort it takes. Just a short sentence, just one emotion, and yet the impact is deep. But here's the deeper paradox. You take the power out of emotion by respecting it. You don't fight the feeling, you don't deny it, you honor it. And honoring it gives it less control.
Most emotional reactions come not just from the feeling itself, but from the fear of being alone in it. If someone's angry, they don't want a lecture. They want to know that someone sees their anger. And when you say, "You seem really upset," you're not escalating it, you're grounding it. The feeling starts to settle because now it has somewhere to go. This works even if you're wrong. If you say, "You seem anxious," and they reply, "No, I'm more annoyed," that's still progress. They're clarifying. They're naming it for themselves. And that's the goal. Once a feeling is named, it loses its fog. It becomes real, but manageable. Think of it like this. Emotions are like smoke. They cloud everything, make it hard to see, hard to breathe. But when you point and say, "There's the smoke," it suddenly becomes easier to find the fire. You might still be in danger, but now you know where to look. And that's all people want when they're emotional. Direction, recognition, a signal that someone gets it. This is why people calm down when therapists say, "You sound sad," or when a friend quietly says, "You don't seem like yourself today." It's not about fixing, it's about witnessing. And being witnessed gives the emotion less control. Now flip the roles. When you're the one feeling something strong and someone says, "That sounds exhausting," or "You look like you're carrying a lot," it instantly shifts something. You feel lighter. Not because the problem is gone, but because you're no longer invisible. The paradox deepens. People don't need you to remove their pain. They need you to recognize it. And when you do that, you reduce it without touching it. You lower the weight without lifting it. You ease the chaos without solving a thing. Because naming emotion is emotional CPR. It helps someone breathe again, not through effort, but through presence. Not through wisdom, but through words. And not many, just enough. Just a single line to let them know you see them in their storm. And somehow, that seeing becomes shelter. It feels unnatural at first. We want to jump in, offer fixes, push positivity. But the deeper power is in restraint, in staying with the feeling and not pushing it away, in saying, "You seem hurt," and stopping right there. That's where the connection begins, not with solutions, but with stillness, not with answers, but with acknowledgement. That's what makes this so paradoxical. You calm someone down not by changing how they feel, but by validating what they feel. You don't reduce the emotion by resisting it. You reduce it by naming it. So next time someone's upset, don't fill the air, don't explain, don't fix. Just pause, look at them, and give the feeling a name, even a guess. That guess becomes a bridge, and on the other side of that bridge is calm, clarity, and trust. That's the strange magic of affect labeling. The name shrinks the pain, and the smallest word can hold the heaviest feeling.
Welcome to the next paradox. The door-in-the-face paradox. The paradox of planned failure, also known as the door-in-the-face paradox. This one is about how starting too big can help you get exactly what you want. It sounds like a bad strategy. Ask for something ridiculous, something they'll definitely say no to. Isn't that just setting yourself up for rejection? But here's where the paradox kicks in. That no you get from the first bigger request actually opens the door to a yes on the second smaller one. You didn't fail, you just softened the ground. This is called the door-in-the-face technique. You knock, they slam the door, and then when you knock again with something more reasonable, they open it. Because now, compared to the first thing, the second one doesn't feel like a big deal. The contrast changes everything. Let's say you ask someone to donate $500 to your project. That's a hard no. But then you say, okay, how about just $20? Suddenly, $20 feels small. Not because $20 changed, but because you changed what it was standing next to. This is the trick of perspective. Nothing really shifts except the frame. The second request is the one you actually wanted all along. But by leading with something bigger, you make that second ask feel lighter, easier, more acceptable. The paradox is that failure, planned failure, becomes the path to success. You win by losing first. And it works because people want to feel fair. When they say no to something big, there's a little guilt, a little tension. They don't want to seem unhelpful. So when you follow up with something smaller, they get a chance to say yes without feeling taken advantage of. It feels like compromise. It feels like cooperation. It feels better. It only works when it feels real. If your big request feels fake or manipulative, the whole thing falls apart. The first no has to sound believable. You need to ask for something just a little out of reach, not something ridiculous. It has to look like you truly wanted that first thing and then adjusted when it didn't happen. That adjustment is what makes the effect work. It looks like you're compromising, but in reality, you're guiding the direction. Here's where the paradox gets deeper. People are more likely to say yes to something they originally wanted to say no to as long as it follows something bigger. So it's not about directly changing their mind, it's about changing their frame of reference. What seemed too much before now feels easy. The pressure drops. The request becomes easier to accept. And it all starts with rejection. You walk into a no on purpose. You plant it. Let it happen, and then you make your real move. That's the strategy that feels like sabotage but turns into success. This goes against our instincts. We're taught to be polite, reasonable, and careful. But this is what you might call strategic irrationality. You deliberately overreach not to take more, but to make the real request seem lighter. You build tension on purpose so that the release feels good.
It's like lifting something heavy and then picking up something light right after. The light object feels almost weightless, not because it is, but because of what came before. The same thing happens in the mind. Some people might say, "Isn't this manipulation?" But here's the twist. It doesn't work if it feels manipulative. It has to feel like a real conversation, a genuine change of heart. That's why it works best when your first request still feels believable. It has to sound human, honest, and open to negotiation. You might say, "Would you be open to helping me organize the whole event?" They hesitate and say no. Then you say, "No problem. Maybe you could just help me with the guest list instead." That second request now feels cooperative and friendly. They're no longer rejecting you. You've given them an easy win. They get to help without doing too much. You get what you needed, and everyone leaves feeling good. That's the secret of the door-in-the-face technique.
It doesn't pressure people, it releases pressure. It gives them a way out and then a choice. And that choice feels more open than if you just ask for it directly. That's why asking for less after asking for more feels better than starting small. The smaller thing suddenly feels like relief. The brain loves contrast, and contrast creates context. The second request is measured against the first one, not against itself. If you'd only asked for the smaller favor first, it might have felt like a big deal. But compared to the big request, it now feels light, simple, and reasonable. This strategy is used everywhere, in sales, politics, relationships, and negotiations. You ask for everything, then settle for something. And that something is often more than you would have gotten if you'd asked for it first, because it doesn't feel like a favor. It feels like a deal. And that's the paradox again. By risking a clear no, you create space for a likely yes. Most people fear rejection. They run from it. They try to avoid it. But the door-in-the-face method walks straight into it, not to lose, but to shift the stage. It's controlled rejection, and controlled rejection is a setup for agreement. You become persuasive not by being perfect, but by showing you're flexible. You change your ask, you adapt. And that adaptation makes people more open to helping you. It's not about force, it's about flow. You move from high pressure to low pressure, from big to small, from stretch to comfort. And that movement is what people respond to. The mind says, okay, I said no once, but the second thing, that's fair. You're not asking for more, you're actually asking for less. But that less now feels right, and that's what matters. So the next time you want something, don't ask for it directly. Ask for a little more than you need. Expect the no. Let it land. Then smile and say, all right, how about just this instead? They'll pause, think, and more often than not, they'll say yes, because that second ask doesn't feel like a burden, it feels like a break. And all you did was walk through the front door, let it close in your face, and knock again with something easier. That's the paradox. Rejection becomes the key that opens the door.
Zeigarnik effect. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how leaving things unfinished makes people hold on tighter. It sounds strange because we assume people want full answers, clean endings, and complete stories. But no, the opposite is true. If you want to keep someone hooked, don't give them the whole thing. Stop mid-story. Pause before the punchline. Hold back the last piece. Because when the brain starts something, it needs to finish it. It craves the ending, and that craving keeps people engaged. This is called the Zeigarnik effect, a simple idea with powerful impact. It says that incomplete thoughts stick longer than finished ones. The mind holds on to the open loop like a song that never ends until it hears the last note. It can't let go. So if you're talking to someone and you say, "Something happened to me yesterday that changed how I see everything, but I'll tell you in a sec," you've already got them. Their attention locks in, not because of what you said, but because of what you didn't say. You gave them tension, and tension makes people stay. Here's the paradox. Silence is sticky. Gaps grab more attention than explanations. When you leave a thought or story open, the brain keeps cycling it in the background. What happened next? Why did that matter? Where was this going? It becomes mental noise. And the only way to quiet it is to hear the rest. That's why cliffhangers work. That's why people binge watch shows. That's why we remember the stories someone didn't finish more than the one they did. The mind can't help it. It wants resolution. Now imagine this in real conversation. You're sharing something and you pause right before the answer. You say,
There was this one moment in the meeting that completely shifted everything. But anyway, how's your week been? You've planted a hook, and now they're waiting. Not just out of curiosity, but out of psychological tension. Because you broke the pattern, most people rush to finish. But when you hold back, it creates a mental itch. That itch doesn't go away on its own. It needs scratching. And scratching means staying present. The mind is a problem solver, and an unfinished thought feels like a problem, an unsolved puzzle, a question mark hanging in the air. Even if the story isn't life-changing, the lack of closure gives it weight. That's what makes this effect so paradoxical. You don't capture attention by giving more. You capture it by giving less. You don't feed their mind. You frustrate it just enough to make it chase you. And it doesn't stop at stories. Tasks, too. If someone starts something and doesn't finish it, it lingers in their mind. A half-written message, a conversation that ended too soon, a promise to explain something later. These things stay alive in the background until they're closed, and the brain keeps checking back again and again until it gets what it wants. But here's the key. It only works when you've started something real. There has to be just enough substance to pull the mind in. If you hold back too early, there's no tension. If you finish too quickly, there's no suspense.
The trick is in the middle, that perfect spot where you've given enough to spark curiosity, but not enough to satisfy it. Think of it like a movie trailer. You don't show the whole plot. You show the setup, the spark, the stakes, and then you cut. The mind fills in the blanks. It stays curious. It leans forward. And that leaning forward, that's engagement. Now, take this into persuasion, into teaching, into influence. You say, there's one thing almost nobody knows about how this works. But then you add, let's circle back to that. Just like that, you've created pull. Not by demanding attention, but by withholding closure. That's the heart of the Zeigarnik effect. Incompletion creates obsession, not consciously, but subconsciously. You don't choose to keep thinking about the thing you didn't finish. It just loops, it nags, it hums quietly in the back of your mind until you find the resolution. And this is why people get stuck in thought spirals, replaying what they almost understood. This is why one unfinished sentence can be more memorable than an entire speech. This is why one pause before the answer makes the answer more powerful. It's the absence that makes the presence stronger. But like every paradox, it only works if it's subtle. If you try too hard, it feels manipulative. If you withhold everything, it becomes annoying. You don't slam the door. You leave it cracked open, just enough light to see what's inside, but not enough to see it all. And here's the twist. Once you finally give the answer, the story, the punchline, it hits harder because the brain has been waiting. Anticipation magnifies impact. So the ending feels more important, more satisfying, more true, even if it wasn't. That's the illusion. We think the ending was strong, but it's the waiting that made it feel that way. The tension inflated the value, and the mind rewards itself by saying, that was worth it. So the delay becomes the amplifier. The pause becomes the reason the moment lands. You say less, they remember more. You pause, they lean in. You stop the story halfway, they follow you to the end. It's all about loops. Start them. Don't rush to close them. Let the tension build. Let the curiosity pull them forward. And when they finally get what they were waiting for, they'll remember it, not because of what it was, but because of what it resolved. That's the paradox. The unfinished moment becomes unforgettable.
The paradox of name power. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how something so small, so ordinary, can suddenly make you unforgettable. It's just a name, just a word. But when you use it, when you speak it out loud to someone, they feel something shift. Their eyes sharpen, their attention locks in, their chest lifts even slightly.
It's not about the sound, it's about the meaning. Because their name is the one word in the universe that always belongs to them. And when you use it, you touch something personal. This is the paradox of name power. The more often you say someone's name, the more they feel seen, not because you're giving them anything, but because you're calling them home. Names do something logic can't. They create recognition without explanation. You could say 1,000 smart things, and they might forget every one of them. But if you say their name twice in a conversation, they'll remember you. Not because you were brilliant, but because you noticed them. And here's the strange twist. People don't even realize it's happening. They don't think, oh, this person used my name 3 times, so now I like them. It happens silently, under the surface. Their brain just reacts. It hears the name and wakes up. It says, this is about me. I'm important here. Even science has shown it. Hearing your own name activates parts of the brain linked to identity, emotion, and attention. Not generic attention, selective attention. It cuts through noise. It clears distractions. It tells the mind to focus. Now that's why the paradox is so powerful. The thing that feels most ordinary, your name, is the thing that makes the biggest emotional impact when someone else says it, especially when they say it with warmth, with care, with intention. And the best part? You're not giving them anything new. You're giving them what they already have. But now they're hearing it from you, and that makes it echo louder. It sounds like magic, but it's just precision. Think of how people react when you say, "Thanks, Alex," instead of just "thanks." It's a one-word difference, but it turns a generic comment into a personal one. The name pins it down. It makes the moment real. Now do it again. "I agree with you, Sarah." "You made a great point, James." "I appreciate that insight, Maya." Each time the name is spoken, it carries weight. The same words, but now they feel directed, intentional, human. That's why leaders, salespeople, negotiators, and teachers use it all the time. Not because it's a trick, but because it builds a real connection. It says, I know who you are. I'm not just talking to a face, I'm talking to you. And that's what people want. Not just to be heard, but to be recognized. Now here's where the paradox deepens. We think power comes from what we say, from the big words, the clever lines we share, the impressive knowledge we share. But in truth, power comes from making others feel something. And hearing their own name does that instantly. You don't even need a reason. You just weave it in gently, smoothly, not forced, not robotic, not in every sentence, but enough to create a rhythm, enough to remind them that they matter here.
That's the invisible gift of name power. It makes the other person feel central to the moment. And when someone feels central, they lean in, they open up, they remember. And they don't remember what you said, they remember how you made them feel. This is where the paradox takes full shape. The more you say their name, the more they feel like the moment belongs to them. Yet you're the one gaining their trust, their warmth, their attention. You lift them and they lift you back. It's reciprocity without effort. You didn't compliment them, you didn't flatter them, you didn't do anything dramatic. You just said their name. But that alone flipped a switch in their mind that said, this person respects me. Even in disagreement it works. Saying, I get where you're coming from, David, sounds different than just saying, I get where you're coming from. The name softens the tone. It makes disagreement feel respectful, human, and thoughtful. That's the real power in it. It doesn't change what you say, it changes how it lands. It doesn't change your words, it changes the relationship.
You become someone who listens, someone who sees, someone who cares, all without claiming it, all just by speaking the one word that already belongs to them. And here's the final paradox. Their name isn't yours to use, but when you use it kindly, it brings you closer. You're borrowing something personal and giving back something deeper. So don't underestimate it. Don't throw it around like filler. Use it like a key that unlocks comfort, attention, and trust. Say it once at the beginning. Say it again in the middle. Say it one last time before you leave. They won't count the number of times, but they'll feel it in their chest. They'll remember how they felt talking to you. And long after the words fade, their name will echo back to them with your voice behind it. That's how something so small carries so much weight. That's how saying their name gives you the space to be heard. And that's the paradox. The best way to stand out is to say their name, not yours.
The spotlight paradox.
Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how you are the star of the show, but only in your own mind. It sounds like a contradiction, but it's true. People often feel like every eye is on them, every thought is about them, and every mistake is being judged. They think the world is watching and criticizing. But the paradox is this: the world is actually paying far less attention to them than they think. In reality, people are usually so absorbed in their own worries, flaws, and insecurities that they barely notice what anyone else is doing. This is called the spotlight effect. It's a strange twist. You feel like you're on stage with all the lights focused on you, and every small mistake is magnified. But the truth is, people aren't watching you nearly as much as you believe. They're too busy dealing with their own lives. The way you think everyone saw your embarrassing slip, most of them didn't even notice. So here's the paradox. You're the center of your world, but not as much as you think. This is powerful to remember, especially when you feel embarrassed or self-conscious. You might think the whole room is watching you stumble, hearing you fumble your words, or noticing your awkward moment. But in reality, you're probably the only one who cares that much. The attention you imagine is usually just an illusion. Here's why this paradox is so striking. When you're embarrassed, your mistake feels huge, like it's the only thing in the room that matters. But in truth, no one else is focused on it nearly as much as you are. The spotlight effect makes you think you're the star of a show, and every error is replayed in everyone's minds. But the truth is, the spotlight is much dimmer than you feel. Think about it. You've probably had moments where you felt embarrassed over something small. Maybe you tripped, said the wrong thing, or mispronounced a word. You thought everyone saw it, everyone laughed, everyone judged. But later, when you asked others, they barely remembered, or maybe they never even noticed. Their minds were busy with their own worries, just like yours was with yours. So the paradox is simple. You're the main character in your own head. But to everyone else, you're just another person going through life, just like they are. This effect works both ways. When you're embarrassed, you feel like you messed up in front of everyone. But people's attention spans are short. They're too busy distracted by their own thoughts and emotions to remember yours in detail.
Your mistake might feel huge to you, but to them it was just a passing moment, barely worth a second thought. And if you're trying to comfort someone who feels embarrassed, this paradox can help. Tell them, nobody noticed as much as you think. You're not the only one in this room with worries, and you're not really under the spotlight the way you feel you are. Each time the name brings weight, the same words, only now they feel aimed, intentional, human. That's why leaders, salespeople, negotiators, and teachers use it constantly. Not because it's a trick, but because it grounds the connection. It says, I know who you are. I'm not just talking to a face, I'm talking to you. And that's what people crave, not just to be heard, but to be recognized. Now here's where the paradox deepens. We think power comes from what we say, from the big words, the clever lines, the knowledge we drop. But in truth, power comes from making others feel something. And hearing their name does that instantly. You don't even need a reason. You just weave it in gently, smoothly. Not forced, not mechanical, not every sentence, but enough to create a rhythm, enough to remind them they matter here. That's the invisible gift of name power. It makes the other person feel central to the moment. And when someone feels central, they lean in, they open up, they remember. And they don't remember what you said, they remember how you made them feel. This is where the paradox takes full form. The more you say their name, the more they feel like the moment belongs to them. And yet you're the one gaining their trust, their warmth, their attention. You lift them, and they lift you back. It's reciprocity without effort. You didn't compliment them, you didn't flatter them, you didn't do anything loud. You just said their name. But that alone flipped a switch in their brain that said, "This person respects me." Even in disagreement, it works. "I get where you're coming from, David." That sounds different than "I get where you're coming from." The name softens the tone. It makes disagreement feel respectful, human, engaged. And that's the power in it. It doesn't change what you say. It changes how it lands. It doesn't change your words. It changes the relationship. You become someone who listens, someone who sees, someone who cares, all without claiming it, all just by speaking the one word that already belongs to them. And here's the final paradox. Their name isn't yours to use, but when you use it kindly, it brings you closer. You're borrowing something personal and offering back something more. So don't underestimate it. Don't toss it out like filler. Use it like a key that unlocks comfort, attention, and trust. Say it once at the beginning, say it again in the middle, say it one last time before you leave. They won't count the number of times, but they'll feel it in their chest. They'll remember how they felt talking to you, and long after the words fade, their name will echo back to them with your voice behind it. That's how something so small holds so much weight. That's how saying their name gives you the room to be heard. And that's the paradox. The best way to stand out is to say their name, not yours.
The illusory truth effect. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how a lie, when repeated enough times, starts to feel like the truth. It shouldn't work. We like to believe we follow logic, facts, and reason. But here's the twist. The brain doesn't always care about truth. It cares about familiarity. It cares about how many times it's heard something before. And the more familiar something feels, the more believable it becomes, even if it's completely false. That's called the illusory truth effect. The paradox is simple. Repetition becomes reality. Not because the statement gets smarter or more logical, but because your brain gets comfortable with it. You hear it once, it's just a line. You hear it 10 times, it starts to sound familiar. And once it feels familiar, your brain lowers its guard. It starts agreeing, thinking, "I've heard this a lot, maybe it's true." And that's the trap. That's why repeated phrases become beliefs. You can't trust anyone. Success is all luck. You're not good enough. When those words echo around you, from others or your own thoughts, they start to feel real. Not because you chose them, but because they repeated. Here's where the paradox deepens. The truth doesn't always win. The loudest thing, the most repeated thing, often does. We don't just believe what's right. We believe what we've heard the most. The brain confuses frequency with fact. It works with good ideas, too. Say something positive often enough. You're strong. You're capable. You're meant for more. Even if you don't believe it at first, repetition makes it real. Repetition builds belief. Belief becomes identity, and identity shapes everything.
But that's what makes it dangerous, because it works both ways. Truth or lie, helpful or harmful, your brain follows the same rule. Hear it enough times and you'll start to accept it, not because it deserves acceptance, but because your brain loves shortcuts. The biggest shortcut of all, familiarity. If something feels familiar, your brain treats it as safe, easy, trustworthy. That trust grows quickly with repetition. You don't even notice the shift. It happens quietly, behind your thoughts, until one day you're not questioning it anymore. It just feels true. That's the illusion. You're not believing truth, you're believing comfort. That's why people fall for slogans, why false rumors spread so fast, why myths survive for centuries. Once something is repeated enough, it sticks. It doesn't matter how wrong it is. It matters how often it shows up. The more you hear it, the more your brain says, "I've seen this before. There must be something to it." And here's the sharp edge of the paradox. You can make people believe almost anything, not by proving it, but by repeating it. It sounds manipulative, but it's also how we learn. It's how affirmations work. It's how mantras stay with us. It's how ideas become personal truths. The key is awareness. Notice which voices fill your mind, which messages keep repeating, because those are shaping your beliefs. And not just your beliefs about the world, but your beliefs about yourself. Think about what you tell yourself every day, the quiet thoughts, the small comments in your head. If you say, "I'm not good at this," every time you fail, you're repeating it, and eventually you'll start to believe it. Not because it's true, but because it's familiar. The more you repeat doubt, the more doubt becomes your reality. The more you repeat strength, the more strength becomes your baseline. It's not about truth, it's about exposure. You can even test it. Take any random fact, true or not, and say it to someone 3 or 4 times in different ways. Don't explain it, just mention it. Slip it into conversation. Later, ask them what they believe. Chances are, the idea will feel more believable than before. Not because you convinced them, but because you repeated it. That's the illusory truth effect. Repetition is persuasion. It's subtle, powerful, and completely irrational.
And here's where it becomes useful. If you want someone to believe in something, a cause, a purpose, or themselves, you don't need to argue. You just need to repeat it consistently and calmly over time. The message will settle. It will sink in. Not because they agreed with you right away, but because their brain adjusted to the sound of it. It's the same with yourself. If you want to shift your mindset, don't wait for motivation. Don't chase deep breakthroughs. Just pick the right sentence and repeat it every day. Every time the doubt creeps in, say it again, and again, and again. It'll sound fake at first, but give it time. Familiarity will win. The lie that held you back was built by repetition. So is the truth that sets you free. This paradox is as dangerous as it is powerful, because the wrong repetition leads to mental traps, while the right repetition builds mental strength. The brain doesn't care which one you choose. It just listens to what it hears the most. That's your power and your responsibility. So use it carefully. Repetition is not just a tool. It's a weapon, a mirror, a machine. It doesn't think. It only echoes. What you feed it, it grows. What you repeat, you believe. And that's the paradox. Truth doesn't have to be true. It only has to sound true long enough, loud enough, and often enough for your brain to let it in.
The yes ladder paradox. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how small yeses can lead to big ones, even when they seem unrelated. It sounds too simple to be real. Ask someone 3 easy questions, get them to say yes 3 times, and suddenly they're more likely to say yes again to the thing you actually want. But that's exactly how it works. It's not about logic, it's about momentum. The more someone agrees with you, the more their brain wants to keep agreeing. It's called the yes ladder. And here's the paradox. The best way to get someone to say yes to something hard is to first get them to say yes to something easy. The shift happens quietly. You start with something obvious. It's warm in here, right? You've been working hard lately, haven't you? You like finding good deals, don't you? These are easy to agree with. No resistance, no pressure, just small yeses, safe yeses. And each time they say it, something happens inside them. Their mind starts building a pattern. Yes, yes, yes. Now that rhythm is in motion. And here's where the paradox kicks in. The brain wants to stay consistent. It doesn't want to break the pattern. Saying no after 3 yeses feels off. So when you finally ask for the real thing, the favor, the offer, the request, they're already halfway there. Not because they've thought it through, but because their mind has been nudged into a pattern of agreement. And this pattern pulls more than logic ever could. That's why this technique works better than arguing. Instead of convincing someone with facts, you guide them with agreement. You don't push them into yes, you walk them toward it, one small step at a time. It's not about tricking, it's about creating flow. The human brain doesn't like to jump between yes and no too quickly. It's smoother to keep going in one direction. And the gentler the start, the easier the journey. Now imagine using this in real life. You're negotiating. You ask, "We both want this to work out, right?" They nod. "We're both aiming for something fair." Another nod. "And we've already made some progress here." That's 3 yeses. Now when you finally ask for the real thing, the favor, the offer, the request, they're already halfway there. Not because they've thought it through, but because their mind has been nudged into a pattern of agreement. And this pattern pulls more than logic ever could. That's why this technique works better than arguing. Instead of convincing someone with facts, you guide them with agreement. You don't push them into yes, you walk them toward it one small step at a time. It's not about tricking, it's about creating flow. The human brain doesn't like to jump between yes and no too quickly. It's smoother to keep going in one direction. And the gentler the start, the easier the journey.
This is why skilled communicators never jump straight to the hard ask. They warm it up. They start with questions that invite agreement, not to manipulate, but to create momentum. That momentum isn't loud. It's not obvious. It's a quiet pull, a mental lean. And that lean makes all the difference. It's the same reason we nod during conversations without noticing. Once we nod once, we keep nodding. It's a rhythm. It's flow. And when that rhythm is yes, it becomes hard to stop. But here's the deeper paradox. The yeses don't even have to be meaningful. They can be surface level, small talk, simple truths. You're busy today. It's been a long week. We all want things to get better. Each one adds to the rhythm. Each one lowers resistance. Each one brings them closer to the big yes you haven't even asked for yet. You're not forcing anything. You're just setting a tone. And tone has power. When you ask someone to agree with you, even about something small, it makes them feel included. It makes them feel in sync. And that feeling of being in sync makes them more open to continuing the conversation your way. That's why it works. Not because you tricked them, but because you built trust through agreement. You said, "We're on the same page, right?" And they said yes. You said, "You want to feel more in control, right?" And they said yes. By the third time, their brain already sees you as an ally, not an opponent. And when the final question comes, it doesn't feel like a leap. It feels like the next step in a pattern that's already begun. Now here's the paradox within the paradox. This only works if it feels natural.
If the yeses are too obvious or come too fast, it feels fake. The magic is in the flow, not the frequency. You guide, not push. You let it unfold, not force it through. If someone senses you're stacking yeses just to trap them, the whole thing collapses. But if it feels like a real conversation with real moments of agreement, the effect becomes real. And here's the wild part. It works on you, too. The more you say yes, the more open you become, the more your mindset shifts toward agreement. Your own resistance softens. You start to trust more, connect more, accept more. It goes both ways. That's what makes this paradox so strange. Agreement builds more agreement, not just between people, but within people. Saying yes starts to reshape how someone sees you. It creates alignment, even if it's temporary. It says, we're together in this. And that sense of togetherness is hard to resist. So the next time you need someone to say yes, don't start big. Start small. Start light. Ask 3 questions you already know they'll agree with. Let them say yes. Let their mind start walking with you. Then, when the moment is right, ask what you really want. You'll be surprised how far those early yeses can carry you. That's the paradox. Agreement doesn't come from force. It comes from flow. And a few small yeses are all it takes to build that flow.
The advice paradox. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how asking for advice brings people closer, while asking for opinions can push them away. It feels like those two things should be the same. You're just asking what someone thinks, right? But no, there's a sharp difference, and that difference is the key to connection. The paradox is this: when you ask for advice, you create respect and closeness. When you ask for opinions, you create distance and judgment. One opens hearts, the other triggers defenses. Here's how it works. When you ask someone for their opinion, you're inviting them to evaluate something, to judge it, to form a stance. And with that stance comes a silent challenge. They start thinking, do I agree or disagree? Do I like this or not? Do I approve of you, your idea, your approach? And now the conversation has weight. It's become a quiet battle between ideas. They speak, you react, and before you know it, you're not collaborating, you're comparing. But when you ask for advice, everything shifts. You're no longer asking them to judge, you're asking them to help. That small shift removes ego. It creates alignment. People feel useful, valued, intelligent. Their guard drops. Their energy changes. Instead of deciding what they think of your idea, they become part of building it. That's the paradox. By giving up some control and asking for guidance, you gain influence. You might think that asking for advice puts you below the other person, like you're giving away power. But actually, it does the opposite. It makes people like you more because you made them feel respected, important, and heard. That feeling makes them want to support you, not challenge you. Psychologically, giving advice triggers pride, not arrogance, but warmth. The helper feels smart. They feel like a mentor, not a critic, and the mind loves that role. When people feel smart around you, they start to connect that good feeling with you. But when you ask for an opinion, the brain shifts into a different mode. Now it has to protect itself. It starts thinking, what's the right answer? How will they take this? Am I being tested here? It becomes a performance, and performance kills connection. That's why asking for advice builds bridges. It doesn't matter if you take the advice. It doesn't matter if you already know the answer. What matters is the gesture. You made space for their wisdom, and that makes people feel honored.
Even if the topic is sensitive, asking for advice lowers the tension. You're saying, I trust your insight. I want to learn from you. That's hard to argue with. There's no battle in that sentence, just an open door. Now, imagine this in real life. You have an idea you want someone to support. If you ask, what's your opinion on this? They pause. They analyze. They look for flaws. That's what the word opinion invites. But if you say, can I get your advice on how to improve this? They pause for a different reason. Now they're looking for how to add something, how to make it better, not whether it's good or bad. That's the difference. Opinions divide. Advice unites. And here's the hidden benefit. People are more likely to agree with something they helped shape. If they gave you advice on it, even a little, they're now invested. They'll root for it. They'll defend it, not because you convinced them, but because they were part of it. That's the paradox inside the paradox. When you ask for advice, people start agreeing with you, not because they saw your point, but because they helped build it. It works in conflicts, too. If someone disagrees with you, don't say, why do you think I'm wrong? That's a trap. It invites defense. Instead, say, what advice would you give me to better understand your side? Watch what happens. Their tone changes. They drop the armor. Now they're not defending, they're explaining. They're helping. And people love to help. That's what makes this simple switch so powerful. You don't need to change your ideas. You don't need to soften your stance. Just change the frame. Move from, what do you think, to, what would you suggest? That one sentence pulls people closer. It works in leadership, teamwork, relationships, negotiation, even in sales. The moment you ask for advice, the energy shifts. People stop resisting and start contributing. And here's the final twist. Asking for advice also makes you more likable. It signals humility, openness, curiosity. You're not pretending to know everything. You're saying, I value your voice. And that alone creates respect. So the next time you want someone on your side, don't ask them to judge. Ask them to guide. Let them feel wise. Let them contribute. Let them see that you're not just trying to win. You're trying to grow. That's the paradox. The fastest way to earn someone's support isn't to impress them. It's to ask for their wisdom.
The paradox of silent presence. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how saying nothing can say everything, as long as you're looking someone in the eye. It seems so small, a glance, a second, just holding eye contact a bit longer than normal. But that tiny act changes how people see you. It changes how they feel. It changes what they believe. And here's the paradox. The more silent the action, the louder its impact. You don't raise your voice. You don't argue harder. You simply hold the gaze. And suddenly, you seem more confident, more sincere, more in control. You didn't add anything. You just stayed a moment longer. Strategic eye contact is power without pressure. When you look someone in the eyes, not awkwardly, not aggressively, just slightly longer than usual, you signal strength without force. You send a message that you believe what you're saying, that you're not hiding, and that you expect to be taken seriously. All of that in a single, silent second. It doesn't make sense at first. We're told to use words to persuade, voice to command, movement to show passion. But this flips all of that. The eyes do the work. Stillness becomes the signal. Not blinking, not looking away, not filling space, just holding. And here's where the paradox tightens. When you hold eye contact longer, you feel more powerful, even if you weren't before. The act of holding someone's gaze doesn't just affect them, it changes you. You feel steady. You feel grounded. You feel like you belong exactly where you are, saying exactly what you're saying. That's the secret. Eye contact doesn't just project confidence, it builds it.
And the person across from you feels it too, not always consciously. They won't say, "You looked into my eyes for 2.3 seconds longer than expected," but they'll feel something, a slight pull, a sense of presence, a trust, a pause before they respond. That's the effect. It's invisible and undeniable. Because the eyes are not just for seeing, they're for feeling. We read emotions through them. We spot truth, hesitation, strength, fear. And when someone holds eye contact a little longer, we lean in, not physically, but emotionally. We pay more attention. We give more weight. We start believing more. This is why great speakers pause and look. Why great leaders don't glance around the room when saying something important. They anchor themselves. They land their words with their eyes. And that landing is what sticks. The paradox here is that doing less creates more. You don't have to shout. You don't have to over-explain. You don't even have to repeat yourself. You just say your line and let your eyes do the rest.
But there's a balance. Hold too long, and it turns strange. Too short, and it loses its effect. The magic is in the small extension, the half second that says, "I mean this," the delay that makes the moment real. And it's not just about confidence, it's about connection. When you make a point and your eyes stay locked in, you create a bond. You're not looking through them, you're not distracted, you're fully present. That presence makes people feel respected, seen, and understood. And when people feel that, they listen, they trust, they respond. Even in silence, eye contact speaks, especially in silence. That's the deeper paradox. Words can be doubted. Eye contact can't. You can fake a sentence. You can't fake presence. When you look into someone's eyes and hold steady, they feel the truth behind your words, or the lack of it. And that's what gives you authority. Not your tone, not your titles, not your volume, your stillness. Your willingness to stay there, not flinch, not fill the moment with noise. Just meet them, hold it, let it land. This works in every direction, with strangers, with friends, in meetings, in conflict, in persuasion. You don't have to push harder. You just have to see them and let them know you're not looking away. Even in disagreement, strategic eye contact softens tension. You're not attacking. You're not backing down. You're simply holding. That holding says, "I respect you enough to stay with you. I'm not running from this." And that subtle act of staying in the moment with your eyes turns friction into dialogue. It's almost unfair how much power it holds. Because while they're scrambling to find words to impress or defend, you're just steady, looking, present. And that presence becomes control. But the control isn't aggressive. That's what makes it different. You're not dominating the moment. You're owning it, quietly, calmly, clearly. And here's the strangest part. People remember the eye contact more than what you said. They might forget your exact words, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And eye contact makes people feel safe, seen, respected, or sometimes nervous, exposed, or vulnerable. It depends on the context. But either way, it's unforgettable. So next time you speak, don't rush. Don't fill every silence. Say your point, then pause. Let it sit. Let them feel the weight of it. Let your eyes carry what your voice doesn't need to repeat. That's the paradox. Your words don't always make the point stronger. Your eyes do. And all it takes is a little longer than usual. Just enough to be felt, not enough to be feared. That's the space where presence lives, where sincerity shows, where power speaks without sound.
The slow speech paradox. Welcome to the next paradox.
This one is about how saying less, more slowly, makes you seem smarter and more powerful. It doesn't feel right at first. You'd think that the faster you talk, the more you prove you know what you're saying. That speed shows sharpness, that quick thinking means confidence. But the truth is the opposite. Rushed speech sounds anxious. Fast talking feels like you're trying to outrun doubt. It sounds like you don't even believe your own words. And that's the paradox. The slower you speak, the stronger you seem. Confidence doesn't rush. It doesn't race. It moves with intention. When someone speaks slowly, clearly, and calmly, people lean in. Not because of loudness or fancy words, but because of pace. Slowness shows control. It tells people you're not afraid of silence. You're not trying to fill space. You're not desperate to be accepted. You're comfortable with your own presence, and that's power. The paradox deepens here. If you want to be taken seriously, don't try to sound impressive. Try to sound certain. And certainty lives in silence, in pauses, in breathing, in giving your words room to land. When you rush, your words pile on top of each other. Meaning gets lost. People feel your tension. But when you slow down, your message gains weight. Each word gets its own moment. And people don't just hear what you say, they feel it. That's what changes everything. A slow voice isn't just easier to follow. It feels more true. The brain treats slower speech as more thoughtful, more honest, more wise. Because fast speech often sends the wrong signal. It feels like sales, like performance, like nerves. Slow speech feels like belief, like you stand by what you're saying. That's why great speakers pause. That's why leaders speak with rhythm. The words you remember most are often spoken at half speed. It's not about being dramatic, it's about being present. Rushed speech escapes the moment. Slow speech anchors it. And that's where the paradox becomes a tool. If you're ever unsure, slow down. People won't think you're lost. They'll think you're measured, in control, even when you're not. That's the power of pace. It doesn't just reflect confidence, it creates it. Your breathing slows, your thoughts settle, and the room adjusts to you. That's the key shift. When you speak fast, you're reacting to the room. You're trying to keep their attention. But when you slow down, the room reacts to you. Your pace becomes the dominant energy, and people match it. They give you time because you show them you're not in a hurry. You're not chasing approval. You're guiding attention. Think about the people who seem the most respected in conversations. They never rush. They never panic to be heard. They wait. They speak when it matters. And when they do, they speak with quiet control. No shouting, no racing. Just a calm voice that cuts through noise. That's the paradox again. You get heard more by speaking less and more slowly.
Speed is not power. Clarity is. When you slow down, you become easier to understand. And what's easy to understand is easier to believe. You reduce friction, you reduce confusion. You sound like someone who doesn't need to prove anything. Because rushing is often a symptom of fear. Fear of silence, fear of rejection, fear of being interrupted. But when you trust your message, you don't need to rush it. You let it breathe. This works in pressure moments too. Interviews, negotiations, presentations. The instinct is to fill every gap, to keep talking, to avoid silence. But those who pause are the ones who get remembered. They're the ones who make their words land, not because of more content, but because of better timing. Each pause is a spotlight. It tells people this part matters. It adds gravity, and gravity holds attention. Even in casual conversations, it works. Speaking slowly doesn't make you boring. It makes you focused. It shows that you're thinking as you speak, not just spilling words. And that thoughtfulness builds trust. People assume fast talkers are selling something. They assume slow talkers know something. And here's the twist. You don't need to change your message at all, just your speed. The same sentence said slowly sounds like insight. Said fast, it sounds like filler. It's not the words, it's the delivery. The paradox reaches its core here. You sound smarter not by speaking faster, but by making space between your words. Space is where meaning lives, not in the words, but around them. Let's say you want to make a strong point. You say it fast, it flies by. People nod, maybe then forget. But say it slowly, with a pause before and after, and it becomes something else. It becomes something they remember. Not because it was new, but because you gave it weight. That's the game. Slow speech adds weight to your words. It's a subtle shift, but a powerful one. And the best part? You don't have to master it instantly. Just start small. Pick one moment a day, one sentence. Slow it down. Let it land. Watch how people respond. Then do it again. Slowly, steadily, just like your voice. Because the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. You'll start to feel the shift inside too. Less rushing, less noise, more control, more calm. And others will feel it too without even knowing why. That's the paradox. People won't remember everything you said, but they will remember how you said it. And if you said it slowly, they'll remember you.
The paradox of scarcity. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how something becomes more valuable the moment it becomes harder to get, even if it hasn't changed at all. This is the paradox of scarcity. The idea that when something is rare or about to disappear, people suddenly want it more. Not because it's better, not because it improved, but because it might not be there tomorrow. That fear of missing out turns ordinary into urgent, and that urgency creates desire. The strangest part? You don't have to change the product, the idea, or the offer. You just change the availability. You say, only a few left, limited time, almost gone, and suddenly people can't look away. But here's the twist. Nothing actually changed except how people see it. That's why this paradox is so powerful. You raise value not by adding anything new, but by creating a sense of loss. People don't just want things that are good. They want things that are disappearing. The same thing that sat untouched yesterday becomes precious today if there's a chance it won't be there tomorrow. Logic says the thing still has the same worth. Emotion says it's slipping through your fingers. And emotion almost always wins. People react more strongly to loss than to gain. Tell them they might miss something, and they'll move faster than if you tell them they might benefit. Scarcity taps into the survival part of the brain. It whispers, act now or regret it. That pressure makes people act, and that action creates momentum, sales, decisions, change. That's why marketers use countdowns, why stores say last chance, why people line up for limited edition products. It's not always because the product is better, it's because it feels rarer. And that feeling of rarity changes perception. Here's where the paradox deepens. The value didn't actually rise, but the urgency did. And urgency is often stronger than value. You can have something truly useful, but people won't care until they think they might not be able to have it anymore. Then suddenly it matters, Not because it became better, but because it became fragile, temporary, fleeting. That shift from always available to maybe not changes everything. It works in conversation, too. If you say, "This opportunity won't last," or "I won't always be available for this," you shift how people see what you're offering. Now they see it through the lens of time, and time creates pressure. Pressure creates decisions, and decisions create change. That's why tickets that say "only 2 seats left" sell faster, why people act when the clock is ticking, why something ignored yesterday becomes must-have today just because it might vanish. We don't want to lose, so we rush in. But here's the deeper twist. Even fake scarcity works. The brain doesn't stop to check if it's true. If something feels rare, it reacts. That's why urgency in messaging matters more than technical details. It's not about logic, it's about emotion. And emotion doesn't ask questions. That's also why people chase exclusivity. They want what not everyone can have. They want to feel like they got in before the doors closed. Even if the thing is the same, the fact that not everyone gets it makes it feel special. The value doesn't shift in the product, it shifts in the access. Scarcity makes things feel earned, and what feels earned feels more valuable. That's the paradox again. You don't need to change the thing, just the context. But there's a limit. If people feel the scarcity is fake, it backfires. It has to feel real, or at least possible.
You can't say only 5 spots left every week. The brain catches on and starts ignoring it. For scarcity to work, it has to feel honest and unexpected, true enough to trigger urgency. When it does, people respond fast, faster than reason, faster than comparison. They skip hesitation and jump in. Not always because they want it, but because they fear not getting it. Scarcity flips the equation. It's no longer, "Do I want this?" It becomes, "What if I can't have this?" And that fear makes people act. Here's where it gets even stranger. When someone finally gets the thing they almost lost, they start to value it more. They protect it, talk about it, feel proud of it, not because of what it is, but because of how hard it was to get. That's the illusion scarcity creates. Struggle adds meaning. Rarity adds weight. We don't just want what's scarce, we treasure it once we have it. And sometimes that desire fades once it's no longer scarce. That's the hidden danger. If everything is always available, people stop chasing. But if things feel limited, rare, special, they come alive. Not because they changed, but because we did. Our perspective shifted, and that shift is what scarcity controls. You don't need more features. You don't need to shout louder. Just shorten the time, limit the spots, reduce the access, and suddenly people see what was always there as something that might soon be gone. That potential loss becomes the trigger. So next time you want someone to care, don't just talk about what it is. Talk about how long it will last, how rare it is, how quickly it might disappear. Let their mind do the math, and let their heart do the rest. Because that's the paradox. You don't raise value by adding anything. You raise value by removing it from easy reach.
The power of because. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how one small word can quietly unlock doors because it seems too simple, too soft. But this one word changes everything. When you use it, even with a weak reason, people are far more likely to say yes. Not because your reason is convincing, but because your structure feels familiar. That's the paradox. People don't always respond to what your reason is. They respond to the fact that you gave one. Because the word because signals that a reason is coming. And when the brain hears that signal, it relaxes. It stops resisting. It listens differently. That one word flips a mental switch. Without it, a request feels random or demanding. With it, the same request feels justified. Even if the logic behind it is thin, It's not the strength of your reason that matters. It's the rhythm of the sentence. You say, "Can I go ahead of you in line?" And people hesitate. But if you say, "Can I go ahead of you in line because I need to make a quick call?" they're more likely to agree. Even if the reason isn't urgent, even if everyone else in line also has things to do, the difference is the key, and the key is because. That's what makes this paradox so strange. A weak reason can still create a strong result. Because isn't about convincing, it's about sounding convincing. The moment people hear it, they expect logic. They assume you've thought it through. They give you credit for intention, and most won't stop to check if your reason makes sense. Their brain hears the structure, and that structure feels safe. This is a shortcut buried deep in how humans communicate. We love patterns, and because creates one. Request, reason, response. It feels complete, familiar. It tells the mind this is a valid sequence. And the mind likes valid sequences more than it likes analyzing every detail, so people go along with it. That's why salespeople use it, why leaders use it, why parents and teachers use it, because it frames a message as thought out, whether it really is or not. And here's where it gets even more interesting. If you say, "I need your help," people might pause.
But if you say, "I need your help because it'll make a big difference," they respond faster. Not because that sentence is powerful, but because it feels complete. That's the trick. The word "because" makes your sentence feel like it belongs, even if the rest of the sentence is empty. You say, "Could you review this for me?" and it feels like a task. But if you say, "Could you review this for me because I value your perspective?" it suddenly feels like a compliment, like purpose, like connection. It's the same task, but with a different frame. And that frame changes everything. People don't just respond to content, they respond to structure. The word "because" gives that structure a backbone. This works in conflict too. If you say, "I need space," it can sound cold. But if you say, "I need space because I want to be clear-headed when we talk," it changes the tone. Now it's not rejection, it's responsibility. That one word reshapes the meaning. Here's the deeper paradox. The reason itself matters less than we think. People aren't logical first, they're emotional. They're wired for shortcuts. "Because" is one of those shortcuts. It tells them something is being explained, even if they don't fully process the explanation. And since most people don't want to analyze every interaction, they accept what sounds familiar. They respond to the pattern more than the words. That's the quiet power here. You're not being manipulative. You're just understanding how language guides decisions. You're not pushing harder, you're paving the road. The word "because" lowers resistance. It calms the part of the brain that wants to say no. It softens the wall that blocks agreement. It makes the request sound more human, more valid, more natural. It's a tiny word, but it opens big doors. Even when you give yourself permission, it helps. Saying, "I'm going to rest," feels one way. Saying, "I'm going to rest because I've earned it," feels different. You just gave yourself justification, and justification reinforces action. This works in your own mind too. If you say, "I'm going to work out," it's just a task. But if you say, "I'm going to work out because I want to feel strong," now it's identity, purpose, drive. The brain likes reasons, even small ones, especially small ones, because small reasons don't trigger big resistance. So whether you're asking someone for something or reminding yourself why you're doing something, drop that one word into your sentence. Say it slowly, with intention. Let it carry the rest, and the rest will carry more weight. That's the paradox. The word "because" doesn't just follow a reason, it becomes the reason. The foot in the door paradox. Now welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how the smallest yes can lead to the biggest one, as long as you start small enough. This is called the foot in the door technique. You ask for something tiny, easy, almost unnoticeable. something no one would say no to. And once they say yes to that, you follow up with what you really want, the bigger ask, the real goal. The paradox is this. The best way to get someone to agree to something big is to first get them to agree to something small. Not because the small thing matters, but because saying yes once makes saying yes again easier. It works because people want to be consistent. Once they agree to the first request, their brain starts to build a version of themselves that says, I'm helpful, I support this. I said yes before, so I should probably say yes again. And just like that, the door cracks open, not by force, not by logic, but by momentum. The first yes is the foot. The second yes is the open door. That's why the paradox is so powerful. You don't have to convince someone all at once. You just lead them down a path they already stepped on. You ask, "Can I borrow a minute of your time?" They say yes. "Thanks. Now that I've got your attention, could I show you this idea?" Now they're leaning in. They're involved. Not because you convinced them, but because they already agreed once, and now they're following their own rhythm. It's a psychological trick, but not a dirty one. You're not deceiving. You're just starting with something simple. And simplicity builds trust. People say yes to small things because they feel easy. They don't cost much. But that small yes starts to shape the story they tell themselves. A story where they're the kind of person who helps, who participates, who agrees. And people like their story to stay the same. Here's where the paradox deepens. You're more likely to get the big thing when you ask for the small thing first, even if the small thing has nothing to do with the big one. It's not about logic, it's about commitment. Agreement creates inertia. The mind wants to stay in motion. It doesn't want to stop and rethink everything. It wants to stay on the path it already started. And that path leads straight through the second door.
So what kind of small requests work? Anything quick and low pressure. Can you help me carry this? Before asking for more time. Can I get your opinion on something? Before introducing your idea. Would you sign this petition? Before asking for a donation. Once the first yes happens, the second one is already halfway there. It works because it shifts identity. People don't want to contradict themselves. If I helped you 5 minutes ago, I'll feel strange refusing you now. If I said yes before, I want to keep saying yes. It feels smoother. It feels natural. And that natural flow keeps things moving forward. But here's the strange part. If you start with the big ask first, people are more likely to say no, even if they would have said yes eventually. Because now they feel pressure. They feel like you're jumping too far, too fast. They pull back. They protect their space. But if you ease them into it, if you make it easy to say yes at first, they rarely even notice the shift. The second yes doesn't feel like a new decision. It feels like a continuation of the first one. That's the magic. The brain doesn't like starting over. It prefers following through. You're not pushing people. You're walking with them, step by step, request by request, until they reach a place they never would have agreed to at the start, but now they're happy to be there. And here's the paradox within the paradox. They'll actually feel better about saying yes to the big thing if they've already said yes to something smaller first, because now the second yes feels earned. It feels honest. They don't feel tricked, they feel consistent. That's the key. You're not forcing compliance, you're shaping self-image. And self-image is powerful. Once someone believes, I'm someone who supports this, or I'm helpful, or I'm involved, they hold on to that. They protect that identity. Your job is simply to plant the seed with something easy, something almost too small to fail, and then let that seed grow into something bigger. This technique works everywhere, in conversations, in sales, in leadership, in negotiation. You don't start with the full proposal, you start with one line, one ask, one gentle entry. Then you build layer by layer, and each yes makes the next one more likely. But it only works if the first ask is real. If it feels forced or fake, the chain breaks.
the person steps back. They feel manipulated. So the first request must feel genuine, useful, and kind. That's how you build trust. And trust is what makes the second ask land, even when it's bold. That's what makes this paradox so clever. You don't need to change their mind. You don't need to argue. You just start where they already are, saying yes to something small. Then you let that yes carry them forward, one step at a time, until the big ask doesn't feel big anymore. Because by then, it's just the next logical move. That's the paradox. You get someone to agree to something big by first asking for something so small they can't say no.
The paradox of nonverbal agreement. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how a simple movement, nodding your head up and down, can quietly guide someone's thoughts in the same direction. It sounds too subtle to matter, but nodding while you speak, especially when making a point, can make people more likely to agree with you. Not because your words are better or your logic is stronger, but because your body is already agreeing with itself. And here's the paradox. When you silently say yes with your head, other people feel like they should say yes too, even if they don't know why. This is nonverbal suggestion in its simplest form. When you nod while speaking, the other person's brain mirrors the motion without thinking. Their body wants to match yours. And when their body starts nodding, even slightly, their mind follows. Because once the body starts saying yes, the brain starts wondering what it's agreeing with. That's the trick. You don't just say your point, you show it. Nodding is one of the oldest, most universal signs of agreement. It signals trust, understanding, and alignment. It's not loud or forced, but it carries weight. When you nod while speaking, you create a feedback loop. You're confirming what you're saying as you say it, and that confirmation becomes contagious. Now here's where the paradox tightens. You're not asking for agreement, you're modeling it. And people follow what's modeled more than what's said. They respond to what feels natural. If you look calm and certain, and your head is saying yes, while your voice speaks clearly, they're much more likely to go along with you. Even if they're not consciously aware of it, they feel the pull, because agreement feels easier to feel when it's already happening in front of them. This works even when they're unsure. If you nod while saying something like, "This makes sense," or "Most people agree with this part," their brain starts checking for proof, and the first proof they see is you. You believe it. You're nodding. You're steady. And that's enough to tip the scale. That's the paradox. You increase belief by physically behaving as if the belief is already shared. And it doesn't just influence others, it affects you too. When you nod, you start feeling more certain, more aligned. Your brain reads your body language and thinks, "We agree with this. We believe this." That inner belief gives your words strength. You speak with more clarity, more rhythm, more control, all from a simple gesture.
Now imagine using this in everyday conversation. You're sharing an idea and you nod slowly as you speak, not aggressively, just naturally, as if what you're saying is already agreed upon. The other person listens, watches, and starts nodding too. They might not even realize it, but their brain is syncing with yours. Their body joins your rhythm, and that physical match often leads to mental agreement. Not because they were convinced, but because they were carried into it. You don't need to debate. You don't need to win. You just need to lead with your body. Nodding is one of the simplest ways to guide agreement without ever speaking about agreement itself. And here's where it gets strange. People often defend ideas they agreed with in moments like these, even if they didn't fully understand them at first. Because once their body says yes, their brain starts filling in the blanks. It finds reasons after the motion is already in play. So by nodding, You're not just influencing agreement, you're creating space for them to build belief on their own. That's the real power. You're not telling them to agree, you're inviting them to agree, without a word. But the nod must be subtle. Too much and it feels fake. Too fast and it feels pushy. It only works when it matches your tone, calm, steady, in sync with your words, as if the movement and the message were born from the same place. That's how it becomes invisible influence. People don't say, "I agreed because they nodded." They say, "I just felt like they were right," and they'll never know why. This paradox works best when used with care. You're not trying to trick people. You're reinforcing connection. You're showing certainty without force. You're guiding agreement by embodying it. And that's what makes it powerful. Influence without effort. Persuasion without pressure. Presence without performance. Even when listening, nodding works. If someone is talking and you nod as they speak, they feel heard, understood, validated. That makes them more open to what you'll say next. Their guard drops, their trust builds, their mind opens, all from a silent motion. So whether you're speaking or listening, remember, the nod holds quiet power. It's your unspoken agreement with the moment, and that quiet agreement spreads. The paradox couldn't be simpler. The more you act as if agreement already exists, the more likely it is to appear. So the next time you're speaking, gently nod as you talk. Let your head say yes, while your voice carries the story, and their mind will naturally follow where their body already seems to be going.
And now, the next paradox, the memory-rhythm paradox. The idea that 3 is often more powerful than more. It sounds strange, doesn't it? Why should the number of points matter if something's true? But the mind doesn't process truth alone. It responds to rhythm and structure. Here's the fascinating part. People remember information far better when it comes in groups of 3. Not 2, not 4, just 3. That's the paradox. Less detail makes the message feel more complete. You've seen it everywhere. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Stop, drop, and roll. Mind, body, spirit. 3 parts, 3 beats, 3 movements. It just works. It clicks. It lands. And once it lands, it sticks. There's no logical rule that says 3 is the best. It just feels right. Too short feels unfinished. Too long feels like effort. But 3? 3 hits that perfect middle ground, the mind's favorite rhythm. It gives a sense of closure, even before the content fully settles in. That's what makes this paradox so powerful. You say more by saying less. You influence not through volume, but through structure. You make your ideas memorable, not by weighing them down, but by balancing them. 1 is random. 2 is a pair. But 3 is a pattern, and the brain loves patterns. So when you're explaining something, trying to persuade, or making your message memorable, don't overwhelm. Group your points into 3s. 3 reasons, 3 benefits, 3 promises. Watch how people nod along, not because your ideas are stronger, but because the structure feels complete. Structure creates belief even before logic does. That's why people will remember your message long after they forget your exact words. They remember the rhythm, the way it flowed and felt. And nothing creates that sense of balance like the number 3. It's not about logic, it's about instinct. 3s feel natural. They feel reliable. Even children use them in jokes and stories. A man walks into a bar, and then comes character 1, character 2, and finally, the punchline, character 3. The third makes it land. Here's the deeper twist. You don't need more information to be persuasive. You just need better framing. 3 feels whole, and people trust what feels whole. When you present something in 3s, the brain says, yes, that makes sense. Not because it processed every detail, but because it recognized the shape.
Form creates feeling, and feeling creates belief. That's why in advertising you hear fast, easy, reliable. That's why speakers outline, here's the plan, step 1, step 2, step 3. That's why stories have a beginning, middle, and end. You don't need a dozen reasons, just 3 well-timed ones. Because 3 convinces without exhausting. It feels full, not forced. This rule works in every form of communication, in writing, speech, and even emotion. Say, I'm not just disappointed, I'm frustrated, confused, and honestly let down. 3 emotions, and suddenly your words feel real. They have shape, they have rhythm, they resonate. You could list 10 emotions or 20 reasons, but they won't land as deeply as 3 simple, well-balanced lines that belong together. That's why the rule of 3 shows up everywhere, in music, in movies, in branding. Not because it's tradition, but because it works. 3 points aren't just information. They're persuasion disguised as structure. Whether your idea is small or grand, whether your audience is one person or a crowd, the effect stays the same. Speak in 3s, think in 3s, structure in 3s. Because 3 is the number the brain trusts, even when it doesn't realize it. So next time you want to make an idea stick, influence someone, or simply be remembered, don't overload them. Give them 3. 3 reasons, 3 ideas, 3 truths. Because 3 is enough. Not 4, not 2, 3. That's the balance that makes your message feel strong, but simple enough to stay in the listener's mind. That's the paradox. The mind believes more deeply when it's given just enough, never too much.
The illusion of choice, paradox. Now, welcome to the next paradox, the art of staying in control by letting others make the choice. It might sound like you're giving away power, but you're not. When you offer someone a choice, it looks like you're handing them control. But here's the twist. Every option they get is one you've already designed, and both lead exactly where you want them to go. That's the beauty of controlled choices. You don't ask, do you want to do this? Because that opens the door to no. Instead, you ask, would you prefer this or that? Now it's not a yes or no question. It's 2 open doors leading to the same house. You simply let them pick the door they like better. Because they made the decision, they feel a sense of ownership, and that ownership changes everything. When people feel like they're in charge, they become more open, cooperative, and committed. Not because you gave them true freedom, but because you gave them the illusion of it. And that illusion creates real behavior. You stay in control, yet they feel in charge. This works everywhere. With kids, do you want to brush your teeth now or in 5 minutes? Either way, the teeth get brushed. In business, would you like to start the project Monday or Wednesday? Either way, the project begins. In relationships, would you like to talk about this over dinner or after we rest? Either way, the conversation happens. You set the frame, they choose within it, and the mind relaxes. Here's why it works. People naturally resist being told what to do, even if they agree with it. Commands trigger pushback, but choices don't. When something feels like a choice, the resistance disappears, because now it's their decision, and people don't fight their own decisions. That's the trick. Let them choose how, not if. It feels like freedom, but you've already shaped the outcome before they even spoke. That's the paradox again. You maintain control by not acting like you have it. The moment you stop forcing direction and start offering guided options, your persuasion grows stronger. Not because your words changed, but because the frame did. You're no longer pushing, you're guiding. You're still the architect, but they feel like the builder. It works because people crave autonomy. It's part of human wiring. When they feel they have a choice, they feel safe, respected, and included. Even if both choices come from you, the act of choosing gives them peace, and that peace turns into action.
Think of sales. Instead of saying, "Would you like to sign up today?" say, "Would you prefer the monthly plan or the yearly one?" Instead of asking, "Can I send you a follow-up?" say, "Should I call you Thursday or Friday?" The goal is the same, but the feeling changes. Now they're choosing instead of resisting. And when they make even a small decision, they're more likely to follow through because they set the terms. They feel committed, not because the options were perfect, but because they picked one. And what people choose, they defend. Here's the deeper paradox. The more options you give, the less control you keep. Too much choice causes anxiety and hesitation. So keep it simple. 2, maybe 3. Just enough to create movement without pressure. That's when people act. Not because they're forced, but because they feel free. Yet you're still the one driving. This principle applies to everything. Writing, leadership, parenting, persuasion, anywhere people need to feel heard. You create the boundaries, they pick within them. You build the canvas, they choose the colors. That's the secret. They personalize what you've already planned. And that personal touch makes the plan stick harder because it feels like theirs. Even in conflict, it works. Do you want to cool off for 10 minutes or talk it through now? Either way, the conversation happens. But now there's no power struggle, no tension, just calm, because it feels fair. And fairness changes everything. People don't always need to win, they just need to feel included. A simple choice can create that feeling. It makes the outcome feel shared, and shared outcomes build stronger results. So next time you want someone to act, don't demand, don't beg, don't push. Frame the situation. Offer 2 paths that both lead to your goal. Let them pick whichever feels right. They'll feel independent, empowered, and respected, but every step they take will still follow your design. That's the paradox. When you give people control on your terms, they move faster, trust more, and commit deeper because they believe they chose to.
Now, welcome to the next paradox, mental time travel. How giving someone permission to say no actually makes them more likely to say yes. It sounds wrong at first. You make a request and immediately add, "but you're free to decide." It sounds like you're softening your position or losing influence, but that's exactly why it works. This is known as the "but you are free" technique. The paradox is simple. When people feel free to refuse, they become more comfortable agreeing. It all comes down to pressure. When someone feels pushed, they pull back. It's instinctive. The more someone senses you're trying to corner them or convince them, the heavier the request feels. Even if they like your idea, the pressure creates resistance. But when you say, "you're completely free to decide," that pressure vanishes. The wall drops. They no longer feel trapped, they feel respected. Now, they're not being pushed into saying yes, they're stepping into it on their own. And people are far more likely to act when it feels like their own choice. That's the secret. You're not just asking, you're giving them space, you're showing trust, and that trust disarms them. Most people expect manipulation and tactics, but when they feel genuine respect for their freedom, it changes everything. But when you end a request with the simple phrase, "you're totally free to decide," everything changes. The energy shifts completely. You're no longer pulling them towards something, you're inviting them. And people respond far better to an invitation than to pressure. Think about how this works in real life. You might say, "Hey, could you help me move this weekend?" But no pressure, you're free to decide. Or, "Would you mind filling out this quick survey?" Totally up to you. That small phrase at the end, "you're free to decide," sounds casual, but it transforms the whole interaction. It lowers resistance and raises willingness. That's the paradox at work. The less you try to control someone, the more likely they are to help you. Even in sales, it's powerful. You could say, "We think this plan would be perfect for you, but of course, you're free to decide what fits best." Suddenly, it doesn't sound like a sales pitch. It feels like a suggestion. And suggestions feel safer than demands because no one likes feeling trapped. The human brain craves autonomy. We want to feel that we are the ones making choices, that our actions are our own. And when even a little bit of that freedom feels taken away, we push back. But when someone gives it to us, even just through words, we relax. We open up. We say yes more often, not because we've been persuaded, but because we still feel in control. That's the beauty of this paradox. It's not about persuasion, it's about permission. When people feel free to choose, they often choose to help, not out of guilt or pressure, but because the request felt respectful. Even parents use this instinctively with their children. "Can you clean your room today? But it's your choice when you do it." The child doesn't feel bossed around. They feel responsible. They see it as their own decision, not an order. And because it feels like their choice, they're more likely to follow through.
That's what makes this paradox so powerful. It's subtle, it's quiet. Just a few words that flip the entire emotional tone of a request. And the amazing part? It still works even when people know what you're doing. It still feels better than being told. It all comes down to delivery. You're not begging and you're not backing down. You're making a confident request and then releasing control. You're saying, "Here's what I'd love from you," but leaving the choice in their hands. And that earns respect because it gives respect. It turns the moment from transactional to human. Even in delicate situations, this works beautifully. You could say, "I'd appreciate it if we could keep this between us, but of course, you're free to handle it how you think is best." Now the other person isn't responding to control, they're responding to trust. And trust carries far more power than control ever could. That's the essence of the paradox. People help more when they feel free to walk away. When you let go of control, you actually gain influence. Because influence doesn't come from force, it comes from choice. And the more freedom people feel, the more likely they are to choose you. This isn't just theory. Studies show that simply adding the phrase, "but you're free to decide," to a request significantly increases compliance even when the request itself stays the same. It works across cultures, topics, and personalities because it touches something universal, our deep need to feel that our actions are chosen, not imposed. That's the deeper truth of this paradox. People might not always remember what you asked for, but they'll always remember how it felt to be asked. If your request feels like a trap, they'll pull away. If it feels like freedom, they'll lean in. They'll say yes, not because you were clever, but because you gave them the one thing everyone quietly craves, the freedom to choose. So next time you make a request, add those words, gently, calmly, sincerely. But of course, you're totally free to decide. Then stop. Give them space. Let the silence do the work that pressure never could. That's the paradox. When you stop trying to control people, they give you more of their trust and more of their cooperation willingly.
Welcome to the next paradox, the expectation paradox. This one is about how showing a touch of disappointment can actually make people want to impress you more. It sounds counterintuitive. You'd think people respond best to praise, encouragement, and approval. That if you smile and say, "Great job," they'll push harder next time. But often the opposite is true. When you subtly express that you expected just a little more, without anger, without blame, something fascinating happens. They lean in. They try harder. Not because you criticized them, but because they felt your belief in them, and they didn't quite meet it. That's the paradox. A gentle, quiet trace of disappointment can drive someone more than loud praise ever could. It's not about guilt, it's about standards. When someone senses that they didn't fully meet your expectations, and you're not upset, just not thrilled, they start to notice the gap, the difference between what they did and what they could have done. And that small gap pulls them forward, not through pressure, but through pride. Because people don't just want to be accepted, they want to be impressive. People want to feel capable. And when someone they admire shows calm, measured disappointment, it doesn't break their confidence, it awakens it. That's the real magic. It's not about scolding or criticizing. It's more like saying, "I know you can do better," without actually saying it. That quiet belief creates pressure, not the kind that crushes, but the kind that motivates. This works especially well with people who already value your opinion, those who care about how you see them. When your tone changes slightly, when your energy softens just a bit, it silently communicates, "I expected more." That unspoken hope makes them want to rise, not out of fear, but out of a desire to earn your respect again. You don't even have to say much. A sigh, a pause, a quiet breath, a look that says, "I thought you had that," can speak volumes without a single word. And because it's subtle, it doesn't trigger defensiveness, it sparks reflection. They start to ask themselves, "Did I really give my best? Could I have done better?" That's when they begin to coach themselves, and self-reflection always leads to deeper change than external pressure ever could. Here lies the paradox. You don't get more from people by shouting encouragement or cheering louder. You get more by quietly expecting more and allowing them to feel that expectation without spelling it out. But here's the key. The disappointment must be slight. Too much of it turns into shame. Too strong, and they shut down. Too obvious, and it becomes manipulation. The balance lies in keeping it subtle. Just enough to be felt, not spoken. People naturally want to repair what feels slightly off. They want to restore balance. When they sense they've let you down, they act quickly to make things right. And when you remain calm, no anger, no complaints, your silence speaks volumes. That quiet composure is powerful. Its weight pushes them to improve. It also shows belief, because if you didn't expect anything from them, you wouldn't be disappointed. Your disappointment proves faith, that you know they can do better. And people are driven to live up to that belief. They want to prove you right, even after falling short. Here's the twist. When they finally rise to the occasion and you acknowledge it, not with exaggerated praise, but with a calm nod or quiet approval, they feel something deeper than pride. They feel growth. Real, earned growth. Because it wasn't given freely. They had to stretch for it. Your approval now feels deserved, not automatic. That's the paradox. A touch of disappointment makes your praise hit harder, because now there's contrast. They felt the low, so the high lands deeper. It's that emotional gap that makes it meaningful. Even in leadership, this principle holds true. You might say, "I thought we were going to reach that goal." Then pause. No blame, no anger. Let silence carry your message. The team will feel it, and if they care, they'll respond. Not to fix your mood, but to restore their own standard. Because people want to meet expectations that come from respect, not control. That's what separates this from manipulation. You're not punishing or pretending. You're simply being honest, but in a calm, balanced way. You're showing that you see their potential, that they're not in trouble, but they're not finished yet either. That tension fuels growth. Even in close relationships, this dynamic appears. When someone disappoints you and you don't react with anger, but you also don't act cheerful, they feel that shift. And if they truly care, they come closer. They reflect, they ask, they improve. Because quiet disappointment can be louder than words when it comes from belief, not judgment. So next time someone doesn't meet your expectations, resist the urge to rush in, to soften it, or to fix it. Let the silence breathe. Let your stillness speak for you. Show your expectation not with frustration, but with calm presence. If they care, they'll hear it, they'll feel it, and they'll move toward it. That's the paradox. The less you say, the more they want to do. Because deep down, they know they could have done better, and they know you know it too.
Now, here's the next paradox. People don't actually remember what happened. They remember how it felt at its peak and how it ended. This is known as the peak-end rule. It's simple, strange, and surprisingly true. In any experience, a conversation, a trip, a meeting, a show, even a painful moment, people don't recall every detail. They won't remember the full sequence. What stays with them are two things: the most emotionally charged moment, the peak, and how it ended. That's the paradox. The middle can be boring, messy, or even unpleasant. But if the high point hits hard and the ending feels right, the entire experience is remembered as positive. You can have an average day with one great moment and a calm finish, and you'll remember it as a wonderful day. You can go through a stressful event, but if there's one burst of laughter and a peaceful ending, your mind stores it as a good memory. You can watch a 2-hour movie that drags for most of it, but if the climax is powerful and the ending satisfying, you walk out fulfilled. That's the rule. We remember the emotional high and the final feeling, and those two moments rewrite the entire story in our mind. Here's where the paradox deepens. The rest of the experience might have been dull or uncomfortable, but the brain edits it out. It keeps the emotional highlight and the final emotion. Everything else fades, which means you don't need every moment to be perfect. You just need one unforgettable high and a strong finish. On the other hand, if the peak is weak and the ending falls flat, even if everything else went smoothly, it's remembered as mediocre. That's the strange twist. A good experience without a strong emotional moment or ending doesn't feel good in memory. It just gets forgotten. This pattern applies everywhere, in speeches, performances, relationships, customer service, or even personal projects. People remember what moved them deeply and how it concluded. That's why some people stay with us, not because they were perfect, but because they gave us a powerful emotional moment and left us feeling good when it was over. That's why we remember the teacher who gave us a breakthrough insight, or the parent who ended tough days with warmth. The peak gave us impact. The ending gave us closure. Together, they built the memory. Even pain follows this rule. Research shows that people who endure painful procedures remember them as less painful when the ending was gentle, even if the total pain lasted longer. The final feeling reshapes the whole memory.
That's the paradox once again. The mind doesn't measure life by duration. It measures it by emotion. A long and difficult experience that ends well is often remembered as less painful than a short one that ends badly. So, whenever you're designing an experience, whether it's a conversation, a performance, or a moment, focus on two simple things. Create one emotional high point and end on a positive note. That's really all it takes. You don't have to be impressive from beginning to end. You just need to touch the heart once and leave behind a pleasant final feeling. The middle part doesn't carry as much weight as we tend to believe. What truly lingers is the emotional spike and the emotional exit. That's what your audience, your friends, your customers, or your loved ones will remember. Not the details, not the timeline, but the feeling. That's why musicians close concerts with their biggest hit, why great speakers save their most powerful story for the end, and why good hosts bring out dessert last. People take their final feeling and turn it into the summary of the entire experience. That's the paradox. The ending becomes the headline. Even if everything before it was average, a beautiful ending makes the whole thing feel extraordinary. But if the ending is dull or unpleasant, it can ruin the memory, no matter how good the rest was. You can give someone a thoughtful gift, and they might enjoy it. But if you rush your goodbye or leave things awkward, they'll remember that uneasy ending more than the gift itself. Reverse that. End with warmth, clarity, or a kind final word, and suddenly the entire memory becomes brighter. The same applies to relationships. A conversation might have awkward pauses or small misunderstandings, but if you close it with care, honesty, or even just a sincere smile, it transforms into something gentle in memory. If you say goodbye with tension, though, even a beautiful exchange can feel sour afterward. This isn't manipulation, it's awareness. It's the understanding that emotional design shapes memory. You're not pretending. You're choosing to leave people with something that want to keep. That's the power of ending well, the effect of one strong emotional moment. And this principle works both ways. If you want to look back on your own day and feel good about it, create your own high point. Give yourself a closing ritual. Even if the day was stressful, spend the last few minutes doing something peaceful. Your mind will frame the whole day around that ending. You'll go to sleep feeling that it wasn't so bad after all, because your final emotion becomes your summary. So, if you're leading a meeting, finish with clarity and encouragement. If you're hosting a dinner, end with laughter or gratitude. If you're teaching a class, save a moment of insight or lightness for the end. You're not chasing perfection. You're giving meaning to the close. People won't remember the entire sequence, but they'll remember the emotional signature. And that signature is written at the peak and the end. That's the paradox. The middle fades, but the end defines. The highest emotional point carries the meaning. What people feel last often becomes what they believe first. So always finish strong. Leave them with the memory you want them to keep.
The reflective listening paradox. Now here's the next paradox. This one is about how speaking less and reflecting someone else's words can make them trust you more. It might sound too simple to matter. Someone talks, you echo their thoughts in your own words, and suddenly they feel understood. Not because you solved their problem or offered advice, but because you showed that what they said mattered. Here's the paradox. When you stop trying to be interesting and start reflecting their thoughts, they begin to trust you deeply. This is the power of mirroring in conversation. It's not about copying their tone or mimicking their voice. It's about gently restating what they just expressed, using your own language. For example, "So, you've been feeling overwhelmed lately?" Or, "Sounds like you feel unheard." Or, "Seems like you're unsure about what to do next." These simple responses do something powerful. They make the other person feel seen. And being seen is one of the deepest human needs. The paradox here is that when you stop trying to be impressive with your ideas and instead reflect theirs, they feel more connected to you. They lean in, they relax. Because deep down, everyone has the same question when they speak. Did you really hear me? And when you reflect their words back without judgment, you're answering that question through action. You're saying, "Yes, I heard you." This kind of listening builds trust, not because you agreed, and not because you fixed anything, but because you proved you were present. Most people don't get that kind of presence. They get interruptions, advice they didn't ask for, or stories that shift the focus away. But when someone holds up your words and softly echoes them back, you don't just feel heard, you feel understood.
and understanding builds connection faster than approval ever could. That's the twist. People bond more deeply with those who understand them than with those who try to fix them. When you repeat someone's words, even loosely, you're saying, "Your words mattered. I kept them with me." And that's what people want most. Not perfect answers, not brilliance, but proof that their voice landed somewhere.
This works everywhere, in work, friendships, and family. Imagine a meeting where someone says, "I'm worried we're falling behind." Instead of rushing to solutions, you reply, "So you feel like we're losing momentum." You've just given their concern value. You didn't change it or dismiss it. You simply said, "This matters." And that simple acknowledgement builds trust. That's the paradox again. The more you repeat their language, the more they trust your presence. You're not trying to sound smart or dominate the talk. You're simply reflecting. That reflection creates a mirror in the conversation, a mirror where they see themselves more clearly, and they start seeing you as safe. Even in disagreement, this works. If someone says, "I just don't think your idea will work," instead of defending, say, "So you feel like it's too risky or not realistic right now." That single sentence cools the heat. It shows you're listening, even when you don't agree. And that kind of listening builds bridges, because people don't calm down when told to calm down. They calm down when they feel heard. And people don't trust you because you speak louder. They trust you because you reflect better. This approach is especially powerful in emotional situations. When someone is upset, they don't want your opinion first. They just want to know you get it. Say, "That sounds like it really frustrated you," or "It seems like that made you feel invisible." That small acknowledgement makes a huge difference, because now they don't have to repeat themselves. They feel understood. They feel less alone. You're not taking over the conversation, you're making space inside it. You're not speaking for them, you're speaking with them. And that kind of shared emotional space builds connection faster than cleverness ever could. Even in sales, this works beautifully. A customer might say, "I'm just not sure it's worth the price." Instead of arguing, you could say, "So what I'm hearing is that you want to make sure this feels like a solid investment." Now they feel heard. You haven't agreed or disagreed. You've simply acknowledged. And acknowledgement has the power to turn walls into windows. That's the paradox once again. You don't win people over by changing what they think, but by showing them that you truly understand what's happening in their mind. When someone feels understood, their defenses lower. They become more open to what you have to say next. But that kind of connection only works when it's genuine. You can't fake it. You can't just mirror their words back like a trick. You have to be fully present. You have to actually listen. And when you do, your reflection of their thoughts will feel natural. Because it is. The human mind finds comfort in hearing its own thoughts spoken by someone else. It feels soothing, grounding, clarifying. It helps people understand themselves better, and the one who gives them that clarity becomes unforgettable. So next time you want to connect with someone, don't start by talking about your own thoughts. Start with theirs. Listen carefully, then reflect what you've heard. Put it in your own words. Make space for their feelings. Let them feel echoed, not corrected, not fixed, just seen. That's what opens people up. That's what earns trust. That's the paradox. When you reflect someone's words, they remember you, not because you said something brilliant, but because you made them feel deeply understood.
And now comes the next paradox, the subtle touch paradox. Something so quiet, so simple, and so fast that most people never even notice it. The subtle touch. A gentle tap on the arm. A brief hand on the shoulder. Nothing lingering, nothing forceful, just enough to be noticed without being a distraction. That small, respectful gesture can create warmth faster than words ever could. Here's the twist. The less attention you draw to it, the more powerful it becomes. This kind of touch doesn't need explanation.
It doesn't interrupt the flow of conversation. It moves within it like a silent message that says, "You're safe here. We're on the same side. I see you." It creates a small, invisible connection that feels natural even when it's not consciously noticed. That's what makes it fascinating. Most people won't remember being touched, but they'll remember that the moment felt good, that it felt human. That's the secret. A well-timed touch doesn't speak to the mind, it speaks to the body. And the body responds before the mind ever catches up. Touch is one of the oldest forms of human communication. It existed long before words, before stories, before logic. And even today, with all the ways we connect, nothing replaces the feeling of a human hand silently saying, "I'm here." That message goes deeper than any compliment. It reaches beneath thought, but only when it's done gently, briefly, and with respect. The moment it feels forced, the spell is broken. When it's genuine, when it fits the rhythm and emotion of the moment, it adds a kind of closeness no words can reach. You're not trying to make a grand statement. You're quietly signaling trust. And here's the real paradox. The smaller the touch, the bigger the effect. A light tap during laughter, a soft touch on the arm during agreement, a comforting hand on the shoulder during silence. These moments carry quiet power because they feel effortless. That's why it works so well. The other person doesn't think, "They touched me, now I like them more." They just feel a bit safer, a bit warmer, a bit more connected, and they link that feeling to you without realizing it. That's what makes this paradox so intriguing. The smallest, most forgettable part of a conversation, the fleeting gesture no one talks about, can shape how someone feels about the entire interaction. It's emotional anchoring without a script. Even in professional settings, when used appropriately, a small touch can shift the energy in the room. A double-handed handshake, a gentle touch on the forearm when saying thank you. These aren't tricks. They're subtle reminders that say to the nervous system, this person is kind. This moment is real.
And in personal relationships, that impact multiplies. Touch builds trust faster than talk. When someone's upset, all the right words in the world may not help, but a hand on the shoulder during silence can say everything. When someone's happy, your cheers might fade, but a warm squeeze on the arm can make their joy feel deeper. It's strange how something so small can speak so loudly. That's the paradox again. The body picks up what the mind doesn't question. A brief touch doesn't demand attention, but it holds it. It doesn't explain, it communicates. It works because it adds presence. It shows you're not just physically there, but emotionally too. And people can feel that difference. They might forget what you said, even what the talk was about, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And that feeling was shaped, in part, by a 2-second gesture. Science backs it up. Studies show that a gentle touch increases warmth, trust, and even agreement, but only when it's brief, natural, and respectful. Anything longer becomes intrusive. Anything shorter is missed. You're not trying to dominate or impress. You're offering reassurance, the most human kind. And the most fascinating part? The power of touch doesn't come from how you feel, it comes from how they feel. It's not about your confidence, it's about their comfort. That's the paradox within the paradox. You're the one initiating the touch, but they're the one who receives the emotional benefit. Yet somehow, you become the one remembered as warmer, kinder, more trustworthy, because their body linked that feeling of safety to you. So next time you're in a conversation, don't reach out to impress. Reach out to connect. Let your touch be sincere, brief, and in tune with the moment. Say less. Let the gesture speak for you. Touch lightly. Let that single second of contact carry what your voice can't express. That's the paradox. In a world overflowing with words, the smallest, quietest physical gesture often creates the strongest emotional memory.
The echo technique. If you want someone to feel instantly understood, repeat the last 2 or 3 words they just said, softly, curiously, almost like a question. It sounds silly, almost too simple, but try it. Them, I've been so overwhelmed lately. You,
Overwhelmed lately? Suddenly, they open up more. Yeah, mostly with work. The deadlines keep piling up. You? Deadlines piling up? And now they start venting, revealing things you didn't even ask about. You're not giving advice or prying for details. You're just mirroring. Yet it makes them feel deeply understood. Here's the fascinating part. This bypasses their emotional defenses. When people hear their own words reflected back, their brain reads it as validation. They relax. They trust faster. Used ethically, it creates instant connection. Used manipulatively, it can steer someone's emotions without them realizing why. The trick? Don't overdo it. Echo every fourth or fifth response. Change your tone slightly, and keep your eyes soft. People will think you're a gifted conversationalist, when in reality, you're simply reflecting their own thoughts back to them. And once someone feels truly heard, they start craving your presence. Not because you said something profound, but because you listened in a way their own mind couldn't resist.
The silence gap. Most people can't handle silence. In a conversation, it feels tense, awkward, unnatural, which makes it one of the most powerful tools you can use. Here's how it works. Ask a question, then stay quiet. Don't fill the space, just wait. They'll shift uncomfortably, fidget, and eventually they'll start talking, revealing more than they planned to. In that stillness, people panic and spill the truth. Want someone to admit something? Let the silence grow. Want to know what they really feel? Ask, then wait a few seconds longer than feels comfortable. In negotiations, it's devastatingly effective. You make your offer, then pause. Suddenly, the other person starts negotiating against themselves, lowering their price or changing their terms just to break the quiet. The human brain craves closure. When there's an empty space, it must fill it. If you can tolerate that silence, you control the room. Try it. Most people last about 3 seconds. You wait 5, 7, 10. The longer you hold it, the more influence you gain. Not by pressure, not by argument, but by letting their own discomfort work for you. It's persuasion without pushing, control without effort, power born from stillness. The false choice trap. You want someone to choose option A, but you can't just tell them. That feels forceful. Instead, you offer them a choice, one where every option leads to your goal. Instead of asking, "Can I schedule you for Tuesday?" you say, "Would Tuesday or Thursday work better for you?" Now it's no longer if, it's when. This illusion of choice makes people feel independent, even though you've already directed the outcome. It's used everywhere. Parents, do you want to brush your teeth now or after your story? Managers, should we finalize the plan today or tomorrow morning? Salespeople, would you like the regular package or the premium one? The genius is in what's missing. The word no isn't an option. Here's the eerie twist. The more intelligent or confident someone is, the better it works because they resist control. The false choice lets them protect their ego while doing exactly what you wanted. But overuse it and people will feel manipulated. Once trust breaks, it's hard to repair. Used sparingly, though, it's precise. A surgical way to guide behavior while letting others believe the idea was theirs all along.
The confession mirror. There's an overlooked truth about people. If you share something slightly personal or vulnerable, they'll often mirror that vulnerability back. Try saying, I always get nervous in big crowds, even when I act like I don't. Watch how they respond. Yeah, I actually hate social events too. I get drained after 10 minutes. You've just lured their walls without even touching them. Why does it work? Humans are wired for emotional balance. When you reveal something honest, it creates a subtle imbalance, and the other person feels compelled to restore equilibrium by opening up too. It works even better if your tone is gentle, your eyes soft, and your presence unpressured. The less you push, the more they reveal. But here's the chilling side. This can make people confess things they never planned to. Their fears, desires, guilt, or resentment all surface naturally. You've triggered a feedback loop of intimacy. Therapists, politicians, interrogators, even con artists use this technique. It's a blade that cuts both ways, powerful for connection, dangerous for manipulation. And the strangest part? Once someone mirrors your confession, they end up feeling closer to you than you feel to them. Because the mirror doesn't just reflect, it absorbs.
Welcome to the next paradox, the paradox of self-consciousness. This one is about how you are the star of the show, but only in your own mind. It sounds like a contradiction, but it's true. People often feel like every eye is on them, every thought is about them, and every misstep is being scrutinized. They think the world is watching and judging, but the paradox is this. The world is actually paying far less attention to them than they think. In fact, people are usually so wrapped up in their own concerns, their own flaws, and their own insecurities that they barely notice what anyone else is doing. This is called the spotlight effect. It's a strange twist. You feel like you're on stage. All the lights are on you, and every small mistake you make is magnified. But the reality is, people aren't staring at you nearly as much as you assume. They're too busy with their own stuff. The way you think everyone saw your embarrassing slip, they probably didn't even notice. So here's the paradox. You're the center of your world, but not as much as you think. This is powerful knowledge, especially when someone feels embarrassed or self-conscious. They think the room is watching them stumble, watching them speak out of turn, or noticing how they fumbled their words. But the truth is, they're probably the only one who cares about it that much. The attention they imagine they're getting is usually an illusion. Here's why this is so paradoxical. When someone is embarrassed, they feel like their mistake is all-consuming, like it's the most important thing in the room. But in reality, no one is focused on it nearly as much as they think. The spotlight effect makes people think they are the star of a show, and every mistake they make is being replayed over and over. But in truth, the spotlight is dimmer than they feel. Think about it. You've probably had moments where you were embarrassed about something trivial. Maybe you tripped or mispronounced something or said the wrong thing. You think everyone saw it, everyone is laughing, everyone is judging. But later, when you talk to others, they barely remember. Or maybe they never even noticed. Their minds were occupied with their own concerns, just like yours was with yours. So the paradox is simple. You're the star in your own head, but to everyone else, you're just another person going through life just like they are. This effect works in both directions. When you're embarrassed, you feel like you've messed up in front of everyone. But it's important to understand that people's attention spans are limited. They're too distracted by their own experiences, their own emotions, and their own lives to remember yours in the detail you fear. Your misstep might feel like a disaster to you, but to them, it was just a passing moment, barely worth a second thought. If you're trying to reassure someone who is embarrassed, this paradox works wonders. Tell them nobody noticed as much as you think. You're not the only one in this room with worries, and you're not under the spotlight like you feel you are.
You feel like it's on you all the time, as if everyone's watching and judging every move. But knowing that they aren't really paying that much attention takes the weight off. It removes the burden of imagined eyes. It lets you breathe easier. The more you realize that the attention you fear doesn't actually exist the way you think it does, the more you can relax. But here's the deeper paradox. This feeling of being watched is an illusion. The spotlight isn't really on you, it's on them. And once you see that, it becomes easier to shake off your own self-consciousness. When you finally understand how little people are focused on you, your mistakes lose their power. That doesn't mean you shouldn't care about how you come across. It doesn't mean you should stop being thoughtful. It just means you should see that the attention you fear is far less intense, far less serious, and far less lasting than you imagine. People move on from your awkward moments quickly because they're busy dealing with their own. Their minds are occupied. So the fear of being endlessly judged is mostly a story your brain tells you. There's a hidden lesson in this paradox, one about confidence. The more you realize that people aren't paying as much attention to you as you think, the more freedom you gain to simply act. If the spotlight isn't shining as brightly on you as you believe, then why hesitate? Why stress over every little slip or mistake? You're walking among people who are all lost in their own thoughts, their own worries, their own embarrassing memories. Theirs are just as messy as yours, and that's oddly comforting. It's what makes us human. So the next time you feel embarrassed, remind yourself of this paradox. You are not the center of everyone's attention. You don't have to hold yourself to an impossible standard. Your mistakes are just small moments that fade much faster than you think. The same goes for others. When you see someone else tripping, saying the wrong thing, or acting awkwardly, don't assume they're under a bright, heavy light. They probably feel the same way you did when you were caught in that same moment. They might believe the whole world is watching them, but in truth, everyone's attention is elsewhere. And here's the final paradox. The more you understand how little people actually notice you, the more confident and free you become. Because you stop performing for an audience that doesn't exist. You begin to act, speak, and move without the constant fear of being watched. You finally see that the spotlight in reality isn't shining that brightly on you at all. So the next time you feel embarrassed, remember the spotlight effect. Relax. Nobody noticed as much as you think,